nearly doubled over the past 15 years, enabling further land grabs and posing serious security risks. Regavim says the consequences are clear. Each illegal road and structure erodes Israeli sovereignty and narrows the window for effective action. This Hanukkah, the lesson is the same as it was 2,000 years ago. Sovereignty is not preserved by words alone. It must be defended on the ground, in real time, and before it's lost.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Alec Pollard, coming to you live from Israel with the biggest stories in the region. The head of U.S. Central Command, General Brad Cooper, has arrived in Israel for high-level talks as the U.S. continues its significant military buildup in the region, including the deployment of the aircraft carrier USS Lincoln, warships, and additional air power. And Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has taken notice, moving to a fortified underground bunker in Tehran amid fears of a possible American attack. Khamenei's son, Masoud, is reportedly now managing day-to-day communications with government bodies, a sign of growing instability and disruption at the very top of the regime. President Donald Trump confirmed that what he described as a massive armada is moving towards the Middle East, saying the U.S. is watching Iran very closely following its deadly crackdown on anti-regime protests. Let's listen.
You know, we have a lot of ships going that direction, just in case. We have a big flotilla going in that direction, and we'll see what happens. We have a big force going toward Iran. I'd rather not see anything happen, but we're watching them very closely. But we have an armada. We have a massive fleet heading in that direction, and maybe we won't have to use it. We'll see.
U.S. President Trump's envoys, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, met with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about reopening the Rafah crossing with Egypt and advancing Gaza rehabilitation plans under the Trump administration's peace framework. Israeli officials stressed that Hamas violations and an impasse on the return of the last hostage, Ran Gvili, have kept Rafah closed. On Friday, IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir told Gvili's parents there is room for optimism, saying the mission to bring Ran home remains a top priority for the entire military. Now, European nations are showing growing reluctance to join U.S. President Donald Trump's new Board of Peace, raising questions about the initiative's international legitimacy. An internal European Union document leaked by Reuters warns the board concentrates excessive power in Trump's hands and departs from a mandate approved by the UN Security Council, with a narrow focus on Gaza. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz says Berlin cannot join the board in its current form, citing constitutional concerns, while Spain flatly rejected the initiative, accusing the U.S. of breaking with international norms. Let's hear Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez.
Es que el gobierno de Estados Unidos no está respetando el derecho internacional y está tensionando como nunca se había hecho la relación transatlántica entre los Estados Unidos de América y la Unión Europea. Frente a ello, creo que no debe caber ninguna duda. Europa debe fortalecerse internamente y también abrirse a otros lugares del mundo.
While talks about the future of Gaza are ongoing, battles are still being fought in the Strip. The IDF revealed today that they completed the dismantling of one of the longest tunnels discovered, 4 kilometers long, complete with adjacent rooms and weapons storage. IDF troops also engaged in a firefight east of the separation line within Israeli control, eliminating 6 terrorists. Now, Israel is closely watching a dramatic and dangerous escalation in northeastern Syria, where Syrian government forces, backed by Sunni jihadist militias and Turkey, are pushing into Kurdish-held areas, raising serious security concerns for Israel and its longtime Kurdish allies. Syrian forces have crossed the Euphrates and are advancing towards the Kurdish-majority Hasakeh province as Kurdish authorities declare a state of general mobilization. Kurdish officials have confirmed ongoing contact with Israel and pleading for help, warning of an imminent massacre similar to what was inflicted on the Druze minority last year if international forces don't intervene. Israeli security officials are particularly concerned that the collapse of Kurdish control could open a new corridor for Iran-backed militias, jihadist groups like ISIS and hostile forces to operate freely across eastern Syria. Now let's bring in Reserve Brigadier General Nitzan Nuriel, the former head of Israel's National Security Council, and Yoni Ben Menachem from the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. Thank you, both of you, for coming here to share your expertise on a range of subjects. Let's start with Iran. It feels like maybe the U.S. has put everyone to sleep a little bit on Trump's goal of striking in Iran, even as all of those forces are building up. Nitzan, what do you think the U.S. is planning to do, or we don't know?
First, we can see the Americans are preparing themselves for all options. And I'm not saying it because I'm trying to be a politician. I'm saying it because no one really tell everything before he is launching an attack. So they prepare everything, all the airstrike they need, all the messages they want to launch. And I believe that within few days, we will see the American launching the attack in order to create the condition to regime change. The attack itself will not be able to get rid of the regime. It should be a combination, including steps from inside. So we shall see.
Yoni, do you agree with that assessment? Do you think in the end of the day, after all this posturing and flip-flopping, the U.S. will conduct the attack?
Well, the quiet that the Americans are keeping is part of the psychological warfare against the Iranian regime. And I think that President Trump knows exactly what's going to happen. He's fully coordinated with the Prime Minister Netanyahu. They coordinate everything in the meeting in Mar-a-Lago in Florida. And of course, the American Navy, American Army don't send all these forces without very specific plans. It's all been organized before, and they are waiting for the order of Trump to go ahead. As for what kind of attack there will be, I can't tell you, but I don't think that it will be something that will bring down the Iranian regime. Maybe it will give them, just a speculation what I'm saying, maybe it will give them the first blow and then invite them for negotiations and put the terms of surrender to them. And if they refuse, then the war will continue.
Let's move on to Gaza. Staying with you, Yoni, do you think Rafah should be opened while Ran Gvili has not yet been returned, and of course Hamas hasn't disarmed yet?
You mean the Rafah crossing?
Yes.
The Rafah crossing is a big problem because during the war we found out that most of the weapons that were smuggled into Gaza came through the Rafah crossing, and by smuggling with Egyptian help, not through the tunnels under the Philadelphia corridor. So this is a very sensitive issue. It's part of the agreement of the second phase of the ceasefire, or whatever you call it, the Trump deal. So we don't have any choice, actually. But the return of Ran Gvili was supposed to happen according to the agreement before the opening of the Rafah crossing, and of course they are violating it, and they are holding the body of Ran Gvili as leverage on Israel, trying to make negotiations using this body. And I think that there is some sort of a deal being drawn out now by Witkoff and Kushner, who met yesterday with the Prime Minister, that there will be a deal of the returning of the body, and in exchange, the opening of the crossing. And the first step will be done by Israel. Israel will open the passage, and then a few days later, they will announce that they found the body. Of course, this is a lie, and they will transfer the body back to Israel.
Nitzan, what do you think about the opening of the Rafah crossing and in general, the Americans trying to push forward with parts of their plan here while other elements like Hamas being dismantled haven't been achieved yet?
I think that the Rafah crossing study case, in a way, show us that we lost the ability to control the overall Gaza Strip end state. It is not in our hand anymore. The Americans are running the show. And obviously, from the Israeli perspective, opening the crossing without having Ran Gvili back in Israel, this is unacceptable. And yet, I believe that we are going to do it, not because we want to do it, because someone pushed us to do it. And as I said, this is a kind of a case study that show us that we are not really control that event. And if I can add something, the Israeli government truly believe that Hamas will keep making mistakes, and by that, all the concept of U.S. president in order to recover Gaza will not be able to become through, and Israel will enter Gaza again in order to take over all the Hamas military capabilities without providing any good answer. And then what? This is the story of Gaza for many years, and I cannot see a dramatic change at that stage.
Right, it seems like the same thing over and over again. The money's going to pour in, Hamas is still there, it's all going to be diverted to weapons. Yet Jared Kushner is coming out with this plan saying, look, we're going to make Gaza into a Riviera. So what should Israel be telling Kushner? I mean, Kushner's done some good things for Israel. He, helped orchestrate the Abraham Accords. How should Israel push back against these plans that are just detached from the reality on the ground?
The message we are trying to deliver to our American friends is, okay, you want to try, go ahead. But make sure that you have enough sensors to see that the gap between what Hamas and others are telling you and the truth is as small as we can. And whatsoever, in case of dramatic collapse of all those sensors, we keep the right to launch an attack, because we cannot take chances anymore. We suffer enough from Gaza. And yet the question is, who is going to control that piece of land? By the end state of all the military operations, still on the table, no good answers. As we can see, there are no foreign militaries that are happy to come to Gaza to take care of Hamas. And therefore, I believe the challenges are ahead of us, not behind us.
Yoni, I want to ask you another question regarding Gaza, which is the Board of Peace, where we have on this Board of Peace countries like, or leaders like Erdogan of Turkey, Qatar. Now there's talk about Putin maybe joining, while the Europeans have snubbed the Board of Peace. What does that mean about the future of this body, that a lot of these sort of democratic Western countries don't want to be a part of it, but Muslim Brotherhood affiliates like Turkey and Qatar are going to have a major role?
I don't know if they will have a major role on the ground. What's important is what will happen on the ground. They can sit there and talk. Also, Israel is a member of this peace council. Prime Minister Netanyahu was invited in. So I don't know. Maybe on the issue of policy of this peace council, they will have a say. But on the ground, what is important is there will be no Qatari and no Turkish soldiers on the ground. because they will protect Hamas and prevent us from disarming Hamas or any other force that will want to disarm Hamas. They will prevent it, and will try to revive Hamas. This is the danger of having them on the ground. Right now, Israel objects very strongly this issue of deploying Turkish forces in Gaza, and I hope that we will be able to convince President Trump. Actually, we're in a very complicated situation because of what is happening in Iran. We are paralyzed completely to engage in any dispute with the American president because we need him to destroy the Iranian regime, and this will take a few months, at least a few months. And I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu understands very well that he cannot be re-elected in the Israeli coming elections without toppling the Hamas regime in Gaza. And I think that also President Trump understands that. So it's a matter of a few months until we will have to go into the other part of Gaza where Hamas controls and dismantle the military wing of Hamas.
But surely that's going to be very difficult now that the supposed reconstruction phase has come in. Obviously, from the Israeli perspective, way too soon because Hamas isn't dismantled, Ran Gvili hasn't been returned. But we know that the Americans want to push forward with the reconstruction phase. The Board of Peace is in place. How could Israel even dismantle Hamas once all of these mechanisms have been put in place that can potentially prevent Israel from doing that?
No, you got it wrong. The reconstruction of the Gaza is going to happen on the Israeli side, what is called the yellow side, where Israel controls. There is no military wing of Hamas, and they can now they're starting to rebuild, to renovate or whatever, to put up the new Rafah. But in the other part, where Hamas controls, nobody's doing any renovation there. There are still a few hundreds of kilometers of tunnels and a lot of weapons. So we'll have to go into this area. I think it will take a few months in order to dismantle it because nobody can do the job but the Israeli army.
Nitzan, do you think there is an ability of having that kind of separation between the area controlled by Israel, by the IDF, where you have this reconstruction, and then the area controlled by Hamas? Because this is something that's been proposed in the past by some experts, saying we separate Gaza between the areas that are so-called demilitarized and surrendered and the areas that are under Hamas control. Is something like that realistic?
Practically, this is the situation right now. And again, upon the Israeli government, they will be happy to keep it as long as they can. Any other scenario provide us too many risks. And I believe that we need to touch the hot potato, which is from the US administration, Qatar and Turkey are part of the solution. From the Israeli perspective, they are the problem. And this is something that I cannot see a way to bridge that dramatic gap. Again, from the Israeli perspective, Qatar and Turkey are the problem. And from the US perspective, they are part of the solution. So the status quo from the Israeli perspective is better than any experiment or any chance that may collapse, and then nothing really will stay in our hand.
Right. Let's move on a bit to Syria. We see there that the Syrian forces under the government, under al-Shara, are moving into Kurdish areas. There's always this concern in Israel because of al-Shara's past, of course, a member of Nusra Front, Al-Qaeda, really a jihadist past. And the Kurds were some type of buffer there against such forces, maybe Iranian forces. What does this mean from the Israeli perspective? Nitzan, start with you.
There are two ways to look into the overall situation in Syria. One, if you are an optimist, you say, we do have a president that are willing to recover Syria, are watching into the West, hate the Shiites, hate the Iranians. So maybe we need to give him the chance to be able to rebuild Syria by the Saudis' money, with US money, and so forth and so on. The other side of it is we cannot trust him. Actually, he's a jihadist, and the moment he will take most of Syria, he can again become a huge enemy of the state of Israel. My personal assumption is that we need to give him a chance, and yet make sure that he's not killing innocent people. He does not let the jihadists to mislead him, and hopefully he will be able to control Syria and move forward in order to become a normal liberal state. So that will be the beneficial for all the area. Regarding the Kurds, remember, they were the best US ally in that area. And like in many other places, there is a moment which the Americans, in a way, leave them behind. They did it in Afghanistan, they did it in Vietnam, they are doing it right now in Syria, and the message is not good.
Regarding maybe the Kurds, they're saying, look, we could be massacred here, which is what happened to the Druze. That's also just another issue besides the strategic issues, that there could be a massive human catastrophe here as well.
Yeah, this is unfortunately part of the Middle East legacy, mainly in those Muslim states. I'm not so sure that Israel can save them. I'm not so sure that beside the Americans, no one can really save them if Giuliani really mean to kill them all. I'm not so sure that this is the case, but we shall see.
Right. Of course, all of this, the situation in Syria, the situation in Gaza, can be diametrically, 90 degrees the other direction if the regime falls or not. I mean, how is everyone really just in waiting mode in Israel now to see what happens in Iran? Because, for example, the situation in Gaza also, it's all going to completely change if the regime, if there's some major change of the regime in Iran, no?
Yeah, the Iranian regime is the keystone for the axis of evil. We know that. They still believe that they can reverse everything and control Lebanon and control Syria, and maybe use Iraq in order to control Jordan. From the Iranian perspective, Qasem Soleimani plan to destroy the state of Israel is still relevant. And this is the reason why it's so critical to get rid of that regime. Hopefully, it will come sooner than later.
Yoni, what do you think about how this is all impacting, let's say, the current decision-making regarding Gaza, for example, just kind of this waiting situation, what's going to happen in Iran?
No, I don't think that Iran, of course, this is the head of the snake, of the axis of evil, but I don't think that if their regime will collapse, that it will have any effect on Syria, because Syria is already under the control of the Sunni Jihad by Abu Muhammad al-Julani or Ahmad al-Shah, whatever you call it. As for Hamas in Gaza, it is true that Hamas was supported by Iran with weapons and money, but Hamas also has other sources of financing, which is the Muslim Brotherhood, Qatar, Turkey, and other Muslim countries, Pakistan. So the money can still flow from these countries to Hamas. So not necessarily if the Iranian regime will fall, it will affect directly Hamas. I think they're already preparing the other options. They understand that it's a matter of time until the Iranian regime will collapse, and they have the alternatives.
Of course, what's the problem here from Israel's perspective, you say there are alternatives. Those alternatives are now going to have an active hand in Gaza decision-making, or that's at least the plan from Trump's perspective, is that Qatar and Turkey and maybe Pakistan, even all those countries that you mentioned, are involved in the board of peace. Is that not a major
Yeah,
the
but I
major danger?
explained to you that the problem is what's going to be on the ground. If there will be a presence, a military presence of these forces, Turkey, Qatar, whatever, or Pakistan on the
But
ground
what
in
about
Gaza,
funding, for example?
funding, you have to get the money somehow, and this can be controlled, or at least it will be there will be a possibility to fight it. But on the ground itself, this is a very complicated issue. So this is, first of all, you have to block them for not arriving to Gaza, not to be deployed in Gaza itself. And if Israel will succeed to do that, this is very important, and we'll be able to go and finish Hamas. But if they will be on the ground, and they will get the money, it will be very difficult.
Nitzan, how do you think Israel? Do you think that Israel can keep Qatar and Turkey sort of at arm's length here in Gaza?
Unfortunately, the answer is no. Trump looking for achievements. The only forces that are available fast and effective is mainly the Turkish military forces. They can do it within less than 24 hours. I believe that they will do it, and Israel will reject it, but there's nothing we can do, especially if they come from the sea and enter the side of Gaza, which is not under the Israeli control. I cannot see the Israeli Navy confront the Turkish fleet. Just to refresh our memory, they're part of NATO. So I believe that within few weeks, very few weeks, we will see the Turkish military forces in Gaza trying to launch Trump vision. And again, without being cynical, I believe that there are some agreements between Hamas and Turkey. We are not going to dismantle you. We are going to storage the ammunition you have. This is a big difference. This is part of the game, and unfortunately, we don't have too much in order to change it.
Yoni, final words from you. We haven't talked at all about sort of Netanyahu's maneuvering in this whole maze. How do you think he's been handling the situation?
Look, for what my colleague said, I will use the words of Trump. We'll see what will happen. We'll see what will happen. I think that Trump understands very well the political situation of Netanyahu. He understands that if there will be such a thing as the Turkish soldiers in Gaza and Qatar involvement and whatever on the ground, this will sabotage the chances of Netanyahu to win the Israeli elections. So I don't think that this will happen. I think that the fact that Trump put Qatar and Turkey in this peace council and gave them representation was coordinated with Netanyahu, and this is to compensate them for not having troops on the ground in Gaza. So we'll see what will happen with this thing. Netanyahu have been maneuvering for the last 2 years since the October 7th, and have been doing it very successfully. And now is approaching the most important political test, which is the elections. So if we'll not emerge from this crisis strong, then he will lose the elections. I think that Trump wants him to stay in power. He wants him to win the election so he can help him implement his peace plan in the Middle East. Without Netanyahu, it will be very difficult for Trump, with any other future prime minister, to go ahead and implement the peace plan.
Right. Certainly also political considerations will play a part here as all this
unfolds. It's a big part. This political issue is a big part. And these are private, secret understandings between Netanyahu and Trump. They're working together. So, and this has an effect. We don't know all the details, but I'm sure that it affects the whole peace plan of President Trump.
Our guests, Yoni Ben Menachem and Nitzan Noriel, thank you very much, both of you, for coming on.
Thank you very much.
While Israel's defense establishment has announced no immediate threat to the home front, major international airlines are charting their own course, some of them suspending flights to Israel and the region, citing escalating security concerns. Dutch carrier KLM and Air France announced they are canceling weekend flights to Tel Aviv, with KLM also halting service to Dubai and Saudi Arabia. Other airlines, including Lufthansa, Swiss, United Airlines, and Air Canada, have also canceled or suspended flights. And finally, we've got some exciting news. You can now get Israel updates on our WhatsApp channel. Breaking stories, live updates, and verified reports, all delivered fast and accurate. Just scan the QR code on your screen to join. And you can continue to follow ILTV also from that platform. And that's all from Israel in this broadcast. Thank you very much for watching, and we will
Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel. So if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land, we're here for you. I'm Nadar Gavelazi, and this is ILTV's Weekly Review.
According to a report put together by Iranian doctors, the death toll in the demonstrations in Iran is more than 16,500. President Trump is now saying for the first time that regime change is needed. At the same time, Trump is indicating that diplomacy is still the preferred solution. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
The report put together by Iranian doctors says that most of the more than 16,000 dead are young people under 30, and that a further 330,000 people were injured, with much of the brutal government massacre of its own people coming over a 2-day period. The regime is now moving to consolidate control after weeks of deadly unrest that began over economic distress and evolved into direct challenges to Iran's theocratic rule. In a first, U.S. President Donald Trump appears to call for the end of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's rule in Iran. Trump told Politico it's time to look for new leadership in Iran, criticizing Khamenei personally and labeling him a sick man who should stop killing people. Trump described Iran as the worst place to live anywhere in the world and said the supreme leader's best decision was canceling the execution of over 800 political dissidents. Publicly, Trump said Iran's alleged decision to cancel planned executions of protesters had a major impact on his decision not to launch a military strike, at least for now.
Did Arab and Israeli officials convince you to not strike Iran?
Nobody convinced me. I convinced myself. You had yesterday scheduled over 800 hangings. They didn't hang anyone. They canceled the hangings. That had a big impact.
Amid chants of death to America, Khamenei was anything but thankful in his message to the U.S. president. Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump spoke twice in the past 2 days as Iran continues to threaten retaliation against Israel and U.S. bases across the region if the U.S. strikes. The Prime Minister had this message to the Iranian people at the start of the cabinet meeting.
ישראל עוקבת בדריכות על הנעשה באיראן. הפגנות למען החירות התפשטו ברחבי המדינה. העם בישראל, העולם כולו, משתאה מול הגבורה האדירה של אזרחי איראן. ישראל תומכת במאבקם לחופש ומגנה בתקיפות את מעשי הטבח ההמוני באזרחים חפים מפשע. כולנו תקווה שהאומה הפרסית תשתחרר מקרוב מעול העריצות, וכשיום זה יגיע, ישראל ואיראן יחזרו להיות שותפות נאמנות בבניית עתיד של שגשוג ושלום לשני העמים.
And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accepted President Donald Trump's invitation to join the new Board of Peace, an international initiative that would begin with Gaza and could potentially expand to other global conflicts. The move comes as the U.S. prepares for a signing in Davos, Switzerland. ILTV's India Naftali has the details. India?
Thank you, Sivan. Netanyahu is joining a small but growing group of world leaders who have agreed to take part in this U.S.-led initiative. But behind the scenes, there's still uncertainty about who will ultimately participate, how much authority the board will actually have, and whether it could complement existing international institutions like the UN or compete with them. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has formally accepted U.S. President Donald Trump's invitation to join the newly created Board of Peace, according to a statement from his office. The board is a U.S.-led initiative designed to handle international conflict resolution, beginning with the Gaza Strip, and is set to be chaired by President Trump for life. Countries that have accepted the invitation include Argentina, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Hungary, Kazakhstan, Morocco, the United Arab Emirates, and Vietnam. The move comes as the White House prepares for a formal signing ceremony to launch the board, scheduled for Thursday in Davos, Switzerland, during the World Economic Forum. According to an invitation confirmed by U.S. officials, world leaders have been asked to attend and sign the board's charter, as Washington seeks to accelerate the second phase of its Gaza ceasefire plan. However, only a handful of countries have confirmed that their heads of state will participate, amid a growing unease over what some diplomats describe as an attempt to create an alternative to the United Nations. That concern was addressed by President Trump himself when asked whether his board could replace the UN.
Do you want your Board of Peace to replace the UN?
Well, it might. I mean, the UN just hasn't been very helpful. I'm a big fan of the UN potential, but it has never lived up to its potential. The UN should have settled every one of the wars that I settled. I never went to them. I never even thought to go to them. They should be able to settle those wars. They don't. I believe you got to let the UN continue because the potential is so great.
Diplomats in Europe and the United Nations have warned that the new board could weaken existing international mechanisms and create competing authority over global conflict management. With the signing ceremony happening tomorrow, the Board of Peace is moving from an idea into a real-world diplomatic body. Whether it ends up working with existing institutions like the United Nations or operating as a separate framework for Gaza's next phase remains unclear, and it's certainly raising questions about how the two would coexist. Sivan?
Thank you. Joining us now to discuss Gaza Phase 2, as well as the state of play with Iran, is our panel for today. Colonel Miri Eisen, a senior fellow at the Institute of Counterterrorism, and Asher Friedman, the executive director of the Misgav Institute for National Security. Welcome to both of you to the show. Asher, I'd like to start with you. What are your thoughts on the U.S. pushing forward into Phase 2 in Gaza, as well as inviting Turkey and Qatar to this Board of Peace?
Well, thank you, Emily. We have to recall that the very first point in President Trump's 20-point plan is that Gaza will be a de-radicalized, terror-free zone. Now, there are absolutely people on the Board of Peace, on the Executive Committee, who are people who I know personally, who are truly dedicated to Israel's security, to lasting peace between Israel and Gaza. But the devil, especially dealing with Hamas, is certainly in the details, and how all these various international bodies and boards and committees are going to actually lead to Hamas being disarmed, I think very much remains to be seen.
Colonel Eisen, I want to ask you realistically, I mean, what are Israel's options in terms of Phase 2 in Gaza, and how can the risk posed by potential members of this board, such as Turkey and Qatar, can that risk be mitigated by Israel in any way?
Emily, we already accepted Phase 2 when it was signed or presented by President Trump. And I want to remind everybody, what we as if paid is because we got back on October 13th, 2025, 20 live Israeli hostages. And I put that out there because it has to be connected one to the other. For that, and that's the 20 live and the bulk of the dead, and we still have Ran Gvili, who has not been given back, we had to compromise. We did not know the details of the compromise. And as Asher said very clearly, the devil is now in the details. You cannot go in and out of the area which is controlled still by Hamas except through Israel. The map that President Trump put together and posted is the map that goes hand in hand with this Board of Peace. It includes different lines, that yellow line, and then there's a red line. Israel and the Israeli troops are still sitting in and around the Gaza Strip. You can't go in by air, you can't go in by sea, you certainly cannot go in by land. So how does it actually happen that in this board you have all of these countries that Israel won't allow them in because they have to go through us? This has to be coordinated. I truly think and this is my opinion, I have not sat in the room, not with the Prime Minister, not with President Trump, that the devil in the details has actually, yes, been brought to the table, meaning there's a lot of rhetoric that goes on in Israel right now against what's happening, but I do think that these different aspects were brought up before. I am not surprised that Turkey and Qatar are inside, because at the end, the United States has interests that are not only the security of Israel. I do believe that they strongly believe in that, but that they're also going to bring additional hard-to-swallow elements into the room.
All right, well, I do want to move to discuss a bit more about Iran. Colonel Eisen, let me ask you first. We see U.S. assets being moved to the Middle East, more of them on the way now. Threats from President Trump very much still on the table. Do you think the U.S. will ultimately take action, and what will the objective be for such an operation?
So I'm going to separate that into two, Emily. I'm never willing to give a prediction on what President Trump will or will not do. And that means that they may attack and they may not attack. But I will try and address what would you attack if you attack, because I really don't know to say if they will or not. You need to, at this stage along the way, the threats that have come out very clearly, it has to be against the different regime projects. And that's both the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, which Israel attacked quite heavily in June of last year. I remind everybody we had absolute air superiority. You have to, when you attack something like that, you have to take into account what the Iranians will do. So I expect them to go against Iranian Revolutionary Guard targets, the air defense, and perhaps some of the missiles that I think that Iran would try to fire against us. But more than that, and Israel did not really do this in June of 2025, neither did the United States, is to go against the symbols that we're seeing right now. It could be against the supreme leader. It could be against not just the symbols themselves, but the different structures in which you house this Islamic regime, the one that makes the decisions that have been so horrific for the Iranian people, Persian-speaking people, over I'm going to say the last 40 years or 45 years, and certainly over the last few years, where they have no economy, no electricity, no water, and they have no future, and they're under sanctions. And I think that those different aspects would be attacked by the United States if they choose to do so.
Now, Asher, the New York Times cited a U.S. official who claimed that the strike was delayed because Israel asked the president to delay. There's also been a lot of rumors floating around that Israel perhaps was militarily unprepared to deal with the backlash of an extended fight with the Islamic Republic. Is there any truth in this, in what you're hearing?
Well, I find it hard to believe. First of all, because Prime Minister Netanyahu has defined defeating Iran as one of the primary goals of his historic legacy. Secondly, as Colonel Eisen correctly pointed out, we had achieved near total air superiority over Iran, and Iran has not yet been able to rebuild those air defenses, the sophisticated air defenses that it once had. So Israel could still more or less control the airspace. Now the question is, have we fully refilled the arsenal, the batteries of anti-missile missiles? That's a question that remains, but it's very hard for me to believe that Israel would have dissuaded President Trump for that reason. It's possible that Israel communicated a message that we should let the protests play themselves out and a strike might be counterproductive. I think you could have an argument about that. We have to recall that two very significant things. One is that for the first time, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu have explicitly declared regime change as the goal. And because, as Colonel Eisen pointed out, the economic drivers of which were the base of the protests, the declining real, the skyrocketing prices for food, the water shortages, this isn't over. At very best, the regime may have temporarily suppressed the protests. We're going to see again and again and again protests. And I do hope that President Trump, together with its allies, will take action.
Now, I do want to ask both of you, before we do have to wrap up, we'll start with you, Colonel Eisen. How likely do you think the fall of the Islamic Republic is at this point, based on what we're seeing in the streets right now?
I think that when we're looking at Iran of 2026, we're already hearing voices. I'm not going to say post-regime, but I do have an expectation that it cannot continue the way it is now. Now, a regime fall does not mean, and here comes the liberal democracy. But I do think that there's going to be a change in 2026. By the way, that could be a change for the worse for the Iranian people. It can be worse than it is now. It can be a hardcore Iranian Revolutionary Guard dictatorship, very harsh reality. reality, which is not exactly what exists there right now with all of the horrible things going on. So I do expect a change. I absolutely think that if there is an attack, it would definitely make it even more definitive, but I can't say that the result of that will necessarily be what we all want to hope, which is a better future for the Iranian Persian people.
All right, Asher, and your take. Do you think we'll see the end of the Islamic Republic in the near future?
I think the Islamic Republic has no answers to the economic crisis, and which are probably impacting also the 5 million besieged. They're also going home and they don't have enough money for food, and when they turn on the faucet, the water isn't coming out. But I do think very much, look, we all hope to see Iran integrated into the region, to see warm, open relations between Israel and Iran, to have Iran part of the Abraham Accords or the Cyrus Accords, various other very welcome initiatives. But it does very much remain to be seen whether those calling for democracy or for constitutional monarchy, and also there are different views among the demonstrators, what end game they would like, that we see a liberal, tolerant, open Iran and not another military dictatorship, which I agree is a possibility.
And just before I let you go, I do want to ask you, Colonel Eisner, I want to follow up with one more brief question. In terms of Israel's interest, I mean, what do you believe is in the interest of Israel? A regime change now? Because we've seen some leaders expressing support already for regime change. We know Prime Minister Netanyahu has made that kind of an objective in the past, but you mentioned it could get worse. So what's in Israel's interest today?
I think it could get worse for the Iranian people. I don't necessarily think it would get worse for us. I think that the Islamic regime and its backing of the proxies in the area, a change of regime is better for Israel. If it deteriorates there into a civil war, if we see there something which is worse for the Iranians, my heart can go out to them, but that's not necessarily worse for Israel.
All right, understood. I want to thank our panel for joining us today, Colonel Miri Eisen and Asher Friedman. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
U.S. envoy Tom Barak is welcoming a ceasefire announced today in Syria, but on the ground, Israel is closely watching how it impacts Israel's Kurdish allies in Syria. Barak met Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara in Damascus, while a Kurdish leader, Mazloum Abdi Erbil, said the deal marks a pivotal inflection point. Under the agreement, the U.S.-backed Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces will be integrated into Syria's Ministry of Defense, with an immediate ceasefire declared across northeastern Syria. Damascus will take control of border crossings, civilian institutions, and critically oil and gas fields. The deal comes after regime forces backed by Arab tribal fighters seized key energy assets and advanced along the Euphrates, dealing a severe blow to Kurdish autonomy. Not all Kurdish militia leaders have accepted the terms of the ceasefire. Their forces have suffered losses as Damascus moves to consolidate control over Syria's northeast. Anti-government Kurdish leaders are calling for protection from Israel.
نحن طبعا بنعتبر إسرائيل هي دولة قوية بالمنطقة. وإسرائيل هي طبعا لها مشروع الأول والأخير. نحن بنتمنى إنه الموقف اللي اتخذته بلدان المنطقة باتجاه أي بعض أقليات سوريا تكون نفس الموقف تكون موجود للكرد كمان.
Growing tensions between the United States and Iran are on full display at the moment, just days from when a U.S. aircraft carrier group arrives at a striking distance of Iran. President Donald Trump has issued his toughest warning yet, while Tehran responds with its own sharp threats. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has the latest.
U.S. President Donald Trump has escalated his rhetoric against Iran, saying that if the Islamic Republic ever attempts to assassinate him, the United States would respond with such force that Iran would be wiped off the face of the earth. Trump made these comments in a News Nation interview marking the anniversary of his return to the White House, saying he has given very firm instructions to respond overwhelmingly to such a threat.
Well, they shouldn't be doing it, but I've left notification. Anything ever happens, we're going to blow the whole country is going to get blown up. So we've, originally Biden should have said something, when they made a statement. We always said, why isn't Biden saying anything? Because he didn't. But a president has to defend a president. Like if I were here and they were making that threat to somebody, not even a president, but somebody like they did with me, I would absolutely hit them so hard. But I have very firm instructions. Anything happens, they're going to wipe them off the face of this earth.
Trump's threat comes after Iran's parliament and military warned against any attack on Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, saying an assault on him would trigger a declaration of jihad and set fire to the world. At the same time, Iran's foreign minister published an op-ed stating that Iran would fire back with everything they have if struck. He described an all-out confrontation, long and ferocious, with widespread impact. The tensions are backed by a major U.S. military move. The aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln and its strike force are heading west from the South China Sea toward the Middle East. Tracking data is now turned off after the strike group passed the Straits of Malacca, on course to potentially operate in the Arabian Sea and Gulf region. Based on current speeds, it could be within striking distance of Iran by this weekend, giving Washington options far beyond diplomacy. The carrier, along with its destroyers and aircraft, provide the U.S. with capabilities from precision airstrikes and long-range missiles to surveillance and a powerful deterrent presence. Additionally, U.S. Air Force assets have been redeployed from Gulf states to Jordan, positioning it as CENTCOM's primary forward base against Iran. There is no confirmed strike order, but U.S. officials say all options remain on the table as Washington, Jerusalem, and regional allies monitor the situation closely. As the standoff develops, both sides continue to signal readiness for escalation, and the next few days could be critical.
The two babies who died in a tragic incident at an unlicensed daycare in Jerusalem yesterday are expected to be buried tonight. Investigators now say the leading assessment points to extreme heat and dehydration, not poisoning, as the cause of death. Riots took place as ultra-Orthodox rioters tried to prevent autopsies on the bodies. ILTV's Devil Klein has the latest.
The victims were named as Leah Golovencic, 3 months old, and Aaron Katz, known as Ari, 6 months old. Both died yesterday afternoon at a private daycare operating without a license in the Romema neighborhood. Forensic experts at the Abu Kabir Institute say no signs of poisoning were found on either bodies. Instead, initial findings indicate dehydration likely caused by extreme heat in a closed room where the infants were kept. Dozens of infants were evacuated to hospitals across Jerusalem. All were eventually listed in good condition, but were kept under extended observation due to the unknown cause at the time. Investigators say an air conditioning unit in the room was set to an unusually high temperature, a level that can be dangerous and even fatal for infants. One of the babies may have died a significant period of time before the rescue teams had arrived. Police have detained 3 caregivers for questioning. The daycare, which operated in 2 residential apartments and was reportedly overcrowded with unsafe conditions, has now been shut down. The investigation is continuing as authorities examine possible criminal negligence in one of the most shocking childcare tragedies Jerusalem has seen in years. As authorities seek to determine the cause of death of the 2 infants in Jerusalem, violent ultra-Orthodox protests erupted in Jerusalem, Beit Shemesh, and Bnei Brak. Rioters blocked major roads, clashing with police and shouting at law enforcement in an effort to prevent autopsies, which, according to ultra-Orthodox beliefs, do not coincide with religious law.
For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at ILTV.tv or download the ILTV Plus app. That's it for ILTV's weekly review. See you next week.
And we've got some exciting news. You can now get Israeli updates on your WhatsApp channel. Breaking stories, live updates, and verified reports, all delivered fast and accurate. Just scan the QR code on your screen now to join.
Now, from social media influencers to online podcasters, false and inflammatory claims about the Talmud are once again circulating widely. Joining us now in studio is Rabbi Daniel Rowe, who is taking on these accusations head on and explaining why they're both false and dangerous. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
So, Rabbi Ro, we're seeing a sudden wave of online attacks claiming that the Talmud promotes immoral or violent behavior. What is actually happening right now in the digital space, and why did you feel it was urgent to respond?
Yeah, so it seems that since October 7th, there's been this wave of attempts to attack Israel, attack Jewish people, and one of them has been about the religion. Like, we saw it when Netanyahu gave a speech a few weeks after October 7th and said the phrase, "Remember what Amalek did," which every Jew recognizes. It means never forget when we're attacked. But anti-people latch on that and say, oh, he's referring to Samuel chapter 15 when they went to war against Amalek and is genocidal. The same thing's happening with Talmud. They're going to old quotes that have been long debunked, trying to cherry-pick them, stick them all over social media and say secretly these Jewish people are into killing non-Jews and hating non-Jews. I felt the need to respond when people started reaching out to me, Jews and allies who say we can defend Israel, but we don't know how to defend this. We don't know the Talmud. Right. And so now I put out a bunch of videos that people can use as a resource to know what's really going on and where these are false and made up and so on, or where they're just out of context or whatever it is.
It seems so ridiculous, but so important to do this. So now you show that many of these accusations are not new at all, but actually recycled, like you say, recycled medieval polemics that were already debunked centuries ago, like you say. Why do you think these fabrications keep resurfacing? And why are they so effective in today's social media environment?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I mean, the real story is crazy. It's 1871. There was a Vienna professor called August Rohling. He literally published a thing called the Talmudic Jew. He ended up in a court case against the rabbi called Rabbi Bloch, and the court didn't know what to do. They appointed two Christian experts who spent 2 years researching, found it was all either fake or out of context. Rohling withdrew, he lost his job, but it was always recycling. Julius Streicher was Hitler's big minister of information. He loved these quotes because it's so easy. A quote, it sounds sincere, sounds real, makes Jews look terrible. After World War II, it went into kind of the Nazi circles, the edge of the web. Since the war began, they've been thrown, whether it's Qatari funding or bots or who knows what, this is like moved in heavily in. And yeah, they're so effective because you believe a quote. It says that sometimes even the line, if you look it up, is actually a true line. Just the context is nothing to do with what it sounds like. So they're extremely effective on social media, and they're playing into this narrative of the Jewish monsters.
And so beyond correcting the bad information, what are real-world dangers? What are the dangers that these distortions pose when they frame Jews as following these secret or perverse laws? What does that mean for broader conversations about anti-Semitism?
Yeah, it absolutely plays into anti-Semitic narratives. The truth is, even if they weren't there, this stuff of the Jews like looking nice on the surface, but secretly having this malicious intent is always at the center of anti-Semitic tales. So this just feeds into that. And yes, it's extremely dangerous. It can lead to, apart from demonization of Israel, it can lead to violence against Jews all over the world.
Now, you argue that these attacks often present themselves as ideological critiques rather than anti-Semitism. Why is that distinction misleading? And how should journalists and viewers recognize the difference?
Yeah, so first of all, anti-Semitism is typically like, oh, if we're not racist against Jews, like, I wouldn't, I defend your right to keep your religion, then I can't be anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitic is this kind of social pathology of Jew demonization. And this stuff is the perfect weapon of Jew demonization. You see, you can't attack the Bible because Christians believe in the Bible, but you can attack the Talmud, and most people never read it, don't know it. And so journalists or anyone just seeing this stuff online should find people who know what they're talking about. Don't take our word for it, but allow us to walk you through. First of all, you'll find about a third of the quotes are literally made up nonsense. Another third are just radically out of context, like literally, there's a line, for example, that in the middle of the Egyptians pursuing the Israelites into the sea, a rabbi says the best of them should be killed. Take that line out of context, the best of all non-Jews should be killed. It's absurd, but you need to see the context. Then you need to see Talmud is extremely complex, right? Large, you can debate something for pages. You could literally have a hypothesis that's rejected. There's a very famous one. There's a hypothesis, could it be okay to steal from a non-Jew? And it's rejected. But if you take the hypothesis, so let somebody show you through, let's see them what's really going on, and almost all of these will just dissolve. Judaism is a religion that believes in the value of all human beings. The Talmud says all human beings are created in the image of God and are beloved. That's what we believe. And the attempt to demonize us is a part of this broader attempt to paint Jews as demons.
Well, Rabbi Ro, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
The story of the Jewish people has never been about standing still. It's a story of moving forward, of taking responsibility, of protecting what matters, no matter the challenge. That story is still being written today, not with swords, but with stewardship of the land, with the rule of law, and with the determination to secure Israel's future. And on the front lines of that mission stands Regavim. Regavim is a public movement dedicated to defending Israel's national lands and natural resources in the field, in the courts, and in the public square. Through research, on-the-ground action, and legal advocacy, Regavim works to uphold the rule of law and to ensure that Israel can grow, thrive, and remain rooted in its homeland. When you buy from Blessed by Israel, you're not just shopping, you're standing with the families of Israel's heartland. Every bottle of delicious olive oil, handcrafted necklace, or jar of honey carries the spirit of Judea and Samaria. These, along with many more products, are the tastes, scents, and stories of the Promised Land, made by people rebuilding our biblical homeland every day. Shop now at blessedbyisrael.com and use ILTV's special code BLESSISRAEL for 10% off on your first order.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Alec Pollard, coming to you live from Israel with the biggest stories in the region. The head of U.S. Central Command, General Brad Cooper, has arrived in Israel for high-level talks as the U.S. continues its significant military buildup in the region, including the deployment of aircraft carrier USS Lincoln, warships, and additional air power. And Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has taken notice, moving to a fortified underground bunker in Tehran amid fears of a possible American strike. Khamenei's son, Masoud, is reportedly now managing day-to-day communications with government bodies, a sign of growing instability and disruption at the very top of the regime. President Donald Trump confirmed that what he described as a massive armada is moving toward the Middle East, saying the U.S. is watching Iran very closely, following its deadly crackdown on anti-regime protests. U.S. President Donald Trump's envoys, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, are in Israel for talks with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about reopening the Rafah crossing with Egypt and advancing Gaza rehabilitation plans under the Trump administration's peace framework. Israeli officials stressed that Hamas violations and an impasse on the return of the last hostage, Ran Gvili, have kept Rafah closed. On Friday, IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir told Gvili's parents there is room for optimism, saying the mission to bring Ran home remains a top priority for the entire military. European nations are showing growing reluctance to join U.S. President Donald Trump's new Board of Peace, raising questions about the initiative's international legitimacy. An internal European Union document reported by Reuters warns the board concentrates excessive power in Trump's hands and departs from a mandate approved by the UN Security Council, with a narrow focus on Gaza. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz says Berlin cannot join the board in its current form, citing constitutional concerns, while Spain flatly rejected the initiative, accusing the U.S. of breaking with international norms. Let's hear from Spain.
La realidad es que el gobierno de Estados Unidos no está respetando el derecho internacional y está tensionando como nunca se había hecho la relación transatlántica entre los Estados Unidos de América y la Unión Europea. Frente a ello, creo que no debe caber ninguna duda. Europa debe fortalecerse internamente y también abrirse a otros lugares del mundo.
Israel is closely watching a dramatic and dangerous escalation in northeastern Syria, where government forces backed by Sunni jihadist militias and Turkey are pushing into Kurdish-held areas, raising serious security concerns for Israel and its longtime Kurdish allies. Syrian forces have crossed the Euphrates and are advancing towards the Kurdish-majority Hasakeh province as Kurdish authorities declare a state of general mobilization. Kurdish officials have confirmed ongoing contact with Israel and are pleading for help, warning of an imminent massacre similar to what was inflicted on the Druze minority last year if international forces don't intervene. Israeli security officials are particularly concerned that the collapse of Kurdish control could open a new corridor for Iran-backed militias, jihadist groups like ISIS, and hostile forces to operate freely across eastern Syria. Now, IDF spokesman Brigadier General Efri Defrin says that there are no changes to Homefront command guidelines for Israeli civilians, claiming the IDF is optimally prepared both defensively and offensively. But major international airlines are charting their own course, some of them suspending flights to Israel and the region, citing escalating security concerns. Dutch carrier KLM and Air France announced they are canceling weekend flights to Tel Aviv, with KLM also halting service to Dubai and Saudi Arabia. Other airlines, including Lufthansa, Swiss, United Airlines, and Air Canada, have also canceled or suspended flights. As we reported, Trump has confirmed the significant U.S. military buildup in the region, including naval forces moving towards Iran, even as Israel's defense establishment stresses there is no immediate threat to the home front. And that is all for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
We are here with the one and only Erin Molan. Thank you so much for being here.
Libby, it is so amazing to be here with you and back on ILTV. I'm so excited. This conference is insane.
What are you doing here?
So I came to host the first night, which was amazing. Got to interview Steve Witkoff up on stage, which was phenomenal.
How was it?
Came to support. It was great. Look, a lot of it was focused on Iran for obvious reasons. And I think what people need to remember is he's not going to be able to tell me anything that is considered intel, anything that could give away what they're planning on doing. So it was really interesting, but we didn't get a lot of answers. But I kind of like that because President Donald Trump works in that way, in that before the 12-day war started, President Trump said, I'll give the Iranian regime 2 weeks. 2 days later, Israel went in. So I think people need to have faith and stay strong in that aspect. The other thing we talked about, of course, was the hostages, and he was phenomenal. I could see tears in his eyes. He feels this very deeply. He spoke about President Donald Trump crying in the White House when the hostages were returned and saying to Steve Witkoff, this is the greatest day I've ever had in the White House, which should give comfort to Israelis and Jews everywhere that Donald Trump values this relationship. It's been phenomenal. The energy is incredible. People are crazy. There's like a singles event here as well. I was looking at that online. I did not go.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Did you go?
To where?
To the singles event.
No.
You're working. Very professional.
Wait, what do you think will happen in Iran?
Great question. Look, I am not a fan of doing any kind of deal. I don't think you can do deals with a terrorist regime. And diplomacy is a wonderful thing when it's not a terrorist regime that takes joy in killing its people and the rest of the world. I say no deals. I say no negotiations. I want the US to go in and destroy this regime. I think the people have shown how courageous and brave they are. They're fighting for their lives. And I think for people in America who say America first, destroying this regime is America first. They have the blood of Americans on their hands. They had a bounty out on President Trump. Whether or not they will, I don't know. I look at military infrastructure that's moving towards the region from the US. I know there's a lot of rhetoric saying things have calmed down, and Steve Witkoff said on stage last night that diplomacy is the answer and the key. But these terrorists don't understand diplomacy.
Yeah.
They don't speak the language of diplomacy.
I agree.
So I think nobody wins if they stay in power, and there have been thousands upon thousands of lives that have been lost over the last 2 weeks. We cannot let that be in vain.
Do you think the regime will fall? I think we have a great opportunity. It's now or never.
It's now or never. It's now or never. And I thought during the 12-day war, I thought that was an opportunity. This is the next opportunity. It has never been weaker. All they care about is destroying everyone and anything that doesn't believe what they do. It is a danger to us all. The world benefits immensely if it falls. I worry now that people have lost faith in what the outside world might be able to do to help them. They've shown us what they're capable of. They've shown us they're willing to die for this cause. We can't let them down. We cannot let them down.
I agree. I want to take you 2 years back to October 7. How do you sum up all these 2 years that you stood with the Jewish people, you stood with Israel? How do you sum up these 2 years? Incredible years.
It's a great question, and you know what? They are, despite...
For you, I'm saying...
Well, I mean, I look at what occurred, and an absolute tragedy, absolutely. And there's a lot of focus when it comes to my story on the price that I've paid to speak up and to stand alongside Israel, which is the most obvious thing in the world to me, to fight terror and stand alongside a democratic nation who only wants peace.
Yeah.
And that's true. They only want peace. But I have gained so much. I have gained so much. And I think it's a nice reminder to everyone out there. In the short term, yes, you may pay a price, but to go to bed every night, shut your eyes and know that you're on the right side of history, to know that you stood for what mattered in a world that is constantly encouraging you to do the opposite, has been incredibly special for me. I've been introduced to this entire new world. I travel the world and I fight for what I believe in, and I fight for a future for my daughter. And yes, there are absolutely hard parts to it. Every day there are challenges, but there are challenges everywhere. Choose your hard. Yeah. I choose this hard because it might actually make the world a safer place rather than the other hard.
We see right now we see a rise in anti-Semitism also in Australia. We see what happened in Bondi Beach. What do you think about what happened?
It was horrific, but it certainly wasn't a surprise. I think anyone who's actually, absolutely, if you paid attention over the past 2 years in Australia, and you look at what happened at the Opera House straight after October 7, 2 days later, before an IDF boot had hit the ground, we had people chanting, "Gas the Jews, F the Jews, where are the Jews?" Whatever it was a hunt, and it was a celebration of a massacre. And we allowed that to occur in front of one of our beautiful icons. Nobody paid a price for what is hate speech. That is illegal in Australia. That is threatening. I then look at the Opera, the Harbour Bridge, and I look at people marching, holding up posters of Khamenei, a terrorist leader, waving ISIS flags. I mean, nothing happened. People praised it.
Where is the Prime Minister?
Well, where is he? I tell you what, he's there recognizing a Palestinian state. He's there recognizing a Palestinian state. That's where he is. And sorry, that rewarded October 7.
Right.
That is not the way to go about it. Every decision the government has made has been appalling, in my opinion, in this space. And they have demonized and they've legitimized hate against the Jewish community in Australia. And they can say all they want now, or we did this or we did that. No, you did not do enough to protect your own people and people that contributed to Australia in the most incredible way. So when 2 Islamic extremists opened fire on a bridge at Bondi Beach and killed Jews like animals, and not just Jews, and this is the point I make to people in the West, you might think, oh, but I'm not Jewish, so I'm okay. That's not how they work. They don't check. They might go and target a Jewish event, but they don't check to see specifically, are you Jewish? They want to kill and destroy everything and anyone. And I don't think anyone who's been paying attention was surprised that occurred. They were shocked. It was shocking. It was not surprising.
Do you think the Jewish community right now in Australia is afraid?
Absolutely. They've been afraid for 2 years. Afraid, but you look, synagogue firebombed in Melbourne. I mean, houses set alight, cars blown up, graffiti outside Jewish kids' schools. The most horrific things said. Jews have not felt safe in Australia since October 7, and that is a failing on us as a country.
2 last question. What's your next goal?
My next goal, great question. My next goal, it's to continue to grow and to continue to build an audience, not because that's something that we always want, but because I think what I say matters. And that might sound arrogant, but I have to believe in what I say, and I have to believe in the importance of what I say, or what's the point? So I believe the more people who listen to me, the more people who watch me, the better the world will be. And yes, you can all attack me now and disagree. I don't care. I believe
Erin,
absolutely.
I love you too much for that.
I believe absolutely in that. And I also think, you know what? Peace. I've this year it's so crazy. I've never had as many death threats. I've never been in as many situations that have been threatening. yet I've never felt as much peace inside. And that, to me, I want to continue to do that. I want to continue to focus on what matters. And I'm a mum. First and foremost, I am a mum, and I get to now lead this blessed existence where I've never worked harder, but I control the hours that I do, and I do it from home, and I walk her to school every morning, and I pick her up every afternoon. And she doesn't quite understand what her mummy does yet, but I think she knows it's something a little bit special, and I want to continue to just be the best mum that I can be.
She's our future.
She is fire, and she will absolutely either run the world or commit a heinous crime. I haven't decided yet. I hope she'll run the world.
What message would you like to send to the Jewish people around the world now?
What another great question. I would say be so proud of who you are, despite so many in the world trying to shame you and trying to rewrite your story and trying to control the narrative. What they don't have is the truth. And there's no different versions of the truth. There's not your truth or my truth or their truth. There is the truth. And Israel is not perfect. The Jewish community is not perfect. But my God, in my eyes, they're fairly close to it in regards to, at their core, who they are. And I would say be immensely proud of that and continue to encourage your children to be immensely proud of that, because that is how you survive, that is how you grow, that is how you flourish. You instill pride in your children. And I think that is my message, because that's where it starts, at home.
Erin, thank you so much for this interview. You're the best. Aussie, Aussie, Aussie.
Aussie. I love you, Libby. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
What do Classic Coke and President Trump have in common? And how does this relate to the Gaza Board of Peace? That is what we are going to discuss today. I'm Daron Spielman, and this is True East. What do President Trump and Coca-Cola have in common? Well, this is a can of Coke. And who remembers back in the 1980s when Coca-Cola had a new, fresh idea and came out with New Coke? It had this sweet, frankly, repugnant taste. It turned off masses of people around the world. You know, Coke was trying to copy Pepsi, and they left their old formula and made a sweeter drink. It didn't work. Not only did it fail to beat Pepsi, it actually started to damage the Coke brand itself. So Coca-Cola went back to Classic Coke, and they made an absolute killing. Why? Because that was the original flavor. It's rich, you can feel it, it's just right. Coke was never about New Coke. Now here's the point. The new Gaza peace plan with the so-called Board of Peace, it's basically like New Coke. It's wrong, and it does not reflect the Donald Trump that we know. The first plan, the Trump Riviera plan, that President Trump announced last February, this goes back to 2025, that plan made enormous sense. That was the classic Trump. It was bold, it was refreshing, it was intuitive. It made sense. President Donald Trump has always been at his best when he trusts his instincts, and his first instincts on Gaza were right. Just like this is Classic Coke, and it's right. We want to go back to Classic Trump. But before we compare the two plans, the plan a year ago and the new Board of Peace plan, there's one more lesson from New Coke that matters here. Coca-Cola had tested New Coke for years, and in lab tests, New Coke actually beat Classic Coke and Pepsi. Now, the executives at Coke believed the data. They believed the focus groups, and they believed the experts. So they killed the old formula. What they didn't understand is that lab results do not equal reality. Somewhere, someone put this new Gaza plan in front of a group of people, probably in a room detached from reality, maybe in the Pentagon, maybe in the White House, and like a focus group experiment, everyone began to nod their heads when they began to shelve the Gaza Riviera plan and hear about the Gaza Board of Peace. And they convinced President Trump, possibly, to leave a good idea that was based on his instincts, a great idea, in fact, and move to a bad idea. I don't know what it was that actually caused President Trump to for sure leave, but my hunch is that it was those nodding heads that are to blame. But when the street tells you you're wrong, you can either listen or you can lose your brand. Let's put the classic Trump Riviera plan next to the Trump Gaza Board of Peace, and let's compare them side by side. In February 2025, President Trump presented a bold plan. It called for the voluntary emigration of Gazans to new countries, an actual Riviera, and a future where families that have been trapped under Hamas for the last 20 years could start new lives somewhere else as full citizens, not as permanent refugees. The plan took the critical step of separating the population from Hamas. And that neutralizes Hamas's number one strategy, which is actually hiding behind those civilians. So it takes away the shield from Hamas so that they can be defeated. That plan was totally Trumpian. It came out of the middle of nowhere. It was clear, it was strong, it was decisive. As opposed to the Gaza Riviera plan, the first major failure in the new Gaza plan is it relies on an international committee called the Gaza Board of Peace that includes countries that openly want to destroy Israel. And let me be very clear about how absurd that is. The Board of Peace is not like the board of directors of a major corporation where everyone on that board shares the common interests of the company to succeed. Here, the company is called Gaza, and there are board members that were invited because they want Gaza to improve the good of the region. But there are also countries who want to use Gaza to destroy Israel, like Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey. You don't put the people who want to destroy the company on the board. On October 25, 2023, while the blood was still drying in Be'eri and Kfar Aza, Turkish President Erdogan publicly declared that Hamas are freedom fighters, and he accused Israel of war crimes, while Hamas's atrocities were still fresh. Qatar, that was the financial and planning hub of Hamas's attack on Israel. For over 10 years, leaders like Ismail Haniyeh and Khaled Masha lived in Doha, not in hiding, not under pressure, but as honored guests. From Qatar, they raised the funds and coordinated the strategy and directed the terror operations against Israel from October 7th throughout the 2 years of the war. Egypt was also asked to join the board. Now, we have to understand, all of the weapons in Gaza used on October 7th and after, all of them came from Egypt, where they were smuggled underneath the border. Egypt made a fortune paid by Qatar to fund the arms in Gaza. As soon as the opportunity exists, they're going to do it again. And what's going to stop them? Not the Board of Peace, which for some of its members is really a board of terror. Israel. Only Israel, once again, will need to stop them. The second major failure with the new Gaza peace plan is that it relies on people who are going to handle the day-to-day functioning of Gaza. Now, the head of that panel has already been chosen. He's a senior minister in the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority is run by Mahmoud Abbas, an open anti-Semite and the Holocaust denier, and the architect of terror attacks that killed more than 1,000 Israelis, along with Yasser Arafat, during the Second Intifada. Now, Hamas is beaming with the idea of having a technocratic board made up of Palestinian Authority figures that are going to run day-to-day in Gaza. And the fact that Hamas agrees should be a real sign to us that something's wrong, because Hamas would never agree to a plan that calls for their going out of existence. Now, in 2007, when Hamas took over the Gaza Strip, the Palestinian Authority, the same people were in charge of the Gaza Strip. What did Hamas do? They brought the leaders of the Palestinian authorities up to the top of 10-story buildings and they threw them off. And then they executed the rest in the streets. And they took over Gaza like this. So what would they want more than a technocratic regime run by the Palestinian Authority? I wouldn't want to be a Palestinian Authority member that's going to be left on this technocratic committee after this kind of initiative gets rolling. I wouldn't want to be there, and if I did, I certainly wouldn't climb to the top of any upper buildings. I'd weigh myself down to the ground as much as possible. There is no question that this ignores the reality in Gaza and pushes off the big questions for later. President Donald Trump's original Gaza Riviera plan started with the hard truth. You cannot fix Gaza without breaking Hamas's grip on it. The plan called for the voluntary relocation of Gazans to other countries, gives them citizenship so that they can live new lives elsewhere. And only then, when the citizens are out of the way, can we begin rebuilding Gaza when it is free of terror. That approach understood something absolutely fundamental. Hamas survives by hiding inside the population. When we remove that shield, then Hamas collapses. The current plan does the exact opposite. It keeps the population in place. It leaves the same families, the same clans, and social networks that produced Hamas right where they are. Again, Hamas didn't come out of nowhere. They're staffed and manned by the families in Gaza. There were only a few thousand Hamas members. It is the people that were subjected to the hatred and the ideology and the propaganda of Hamas that filled the ranks to the tens of thousands. So this new plan, instead of isolating Hamas, it actually embeds countries that openly back Hamas into the board of peace, which is not going to... Now, President Trump's original plan, he understood the leverage the United States has and the strength the U.S. has to compel other nations to absorb Gazans as full citizens, not as refugees, not trapped in camps, not in an endless conflict. That would literally break the cycle. It was like such a breath of fresh air. That would remove Hamas's human infrastructure, and it would make real reconstruction of Gaza possible. You cannot build a Riviera on top of terror tunnels. You cannot de-radicalize the Gazan population while the radicalization engine of Hamas remains intact. And of course, you cannot protect Israeli families while enemies who celebrated October 7th are literally just across the fence. You can see them. Now, let me say something very clearly about Israel's role. If there is going to be any type of board overseeing Gaza, Israel shouldn't just be on the board. Israel has to have veto power over the board. We are the ones who are going to have to live with the reality of what happens there. Us, our families, our homes, our children. A plan that offers Israel to be just one more member with the exact same standing as countries like Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey on a piece of land located 1 mile from our border, that is a strategic mistake, a major strategic mistake. Somewhere along the way, we allowed this to happen. And we can see it in the recent public disagreement between Israel and the United States over Qatar and Turkey. How did it happen? Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu has had a closer coordination with this administration than probably any other time in Israeli-U.S. relations. It's produced incredible results. When Israel was left naked with no weapons after the Biden administration, President Trump completely revamped Israel's military supplies and, in fact, increased it beyond any previous level. But when President Trump pivoted away from the Riviera plan, I don't think we could even imagine that we would reach such a misunderstanding about what is good for Israeli security and about what is realistic. I think to Prime Minister Netanyahu's credit, when he clearly saw where this was leading, he knew to put his foot down, something I am very doubtful if many other leaders in Israel would have had the courage to do. But we need to learn from this. Even our greatest ally, the United States of America, any ally between two different countries, has its own interests, and at some point, those interests are going to collide. And even at some point, perhaps the interests of the United States will collide with Israel's. And maybe we shouldn't have let it get this far. But now we need to lick our wounds, and we need to go back to that first Riviera plan. And there needs to be a board of countries in which Israel has the veto power, not only on the board, but of who is included in the board. Now let's talk about where we need to go. We need to clear out the strip of all those who want to leave and engage in a massive building project. I envision 5 or 6 beachfront regions. The United States beachfront, perhaps the Emirates beachfront, maybe one for India, and then the Israeli beachfront, and so on. Each country needs to invest in creating their own beachfront. It will be kind of like Epcot, but instead of just facades, it will be real, with real culture, with restaurants, with beaches, with people that come from those countries. Think about it. You could take a 5-minute walk and go from the Indian beachfront to the Emirates beachfront, to the Israeli beachfront, to the United States beachfront. It's fantastic. 5 beachfront communities. each of which will require billions of dollars of investment. But you know what? I think they're going to make it back. It will be the only place in the world like it, where you can go almost like country to country from walking from beach to beach. Imagine the music, imagine the drinks, imagine the food, imagine the culture. And you've got the ocean there, the beautiful Mediterranean. And yes, absolutely, Israel will be one of the beaches. Going back thousands of years, Jews have been living in Gaza continually until they were expelled by the Arabs in 1948. The Jewish community in Gaza was the longest continuous community there. It goes back before Muhammad and even the rise of Islam. Now, maybe someone out there is shaking their head. Can I prove it? The answer is yes. The Great Synagogue of Gaza goes back to the Roman period. The archaeology and history are there. The pictures are there. It goes back to the 6th century CE. That's the 500s. Islam was founded by Muhammad in 632, 100 years later. The mosaic floor that's found in that synagogue and exists and the pictures show not Muhammad. It shows King David playing his harp. Look it up. There was also an area of Gaza inside Gaza City called Harat al-Yehud, which means the Jewish quarter of Gaza. It's located inside Gaza City in what is today called the village of Zaytun, which is just south of Jabalia. We hear about Jabalia throughout the war. I visited Zaytun and Jabalia during the war. According to Ottoman census records, this goes back 450 years, the majority of Zaytun in the center of Gaza was Jewish. It had more than 600 Jews living there. And that existed until they were forced out by Arab violence and expelled in 1948. Now, what happened in 1948? Gaza went from being under Ottoman control and then British control to go under Egyptian control, not Israel. Israel wasn't in charge of Gaza. Egypt was in charge of Gaza. And Gaza was immediately continued until Israel captured it from Egypt in 1967 during the Six-Day War when Israel was attacked from Gaza. Fast forward to 2005. The state of Israel pulls thousands of Jews. These are not just Jews. These are the greatest Israelis, farmers, people of agriculture and of environment. We pulled them out of Gush Katif. It was a despicable withdrawal from Gaza. We left every single community. We removed every single soldier. And we literally handed Gaza over on a silver platter to full Palestinian control. What did we get in return? Well, you know, tens of thousands of rockets, 3 military actions, 2 wars, and ultimately the massacre of men, women, and babies on October 7th. That experiment failed. So why will Israel have a beautiful beach in Gaza, and why will Israel control security in Gaza? We have the history in Gaza. We've spilled the blood over Gaza, and we're not going to outsource our security to anyone. We mustn't outsource our security to any international force, not to committees, and not even to the United States. Why? Because they change administrations and policies every 4 years. The only people with a consistent policy to protect Israelis is Israel. We didn't sacrifice nearly 2,000 people on October 7th to hand our security and to outsource it. We've learned that lesson. And if we've learned it, we're not going to put our guard down again. Israeli security has got to be non-negotiable, and that is point final. Now, the plan can work, but it requires a lot of American muscle and long-term thinking. Thinking in terms of decades, kind of like the Chinese, not just in 2-year congressional cycles. It means really having vision. And Trump's Riviera plan understood this leverage. The United States has the strength to force a real change, to compel countries to absorb Gazans as citizens, and to break the terror pipeline at the very source. To remove the population Hamas hides behind. You cannot build a Riviera, as I mentioned, directly on top of terror tunnels. And you cannot de-radicalize a people by leaving the regime untouched. And you're not going to be able to sell Israelis a plan that brings our enemies directly on our border. Now in Israel, trust in President Trump has been enormous. He restored our deterrence. He came to the Knesset. He reaffirmed us when others hesitated. Israelis see him both as a street fighter and a businessman who knows when a deal is broken. So let's be very, very clear. This is Trump's Gaza Riviera plan versus the board of so-called peace plan. We want classic Trump. That is how wars are going to end. That is how regions are going to change. And that is how history is going to be made.
Welcome to ILTV Security Brief. I'm Caleb Ben David. Each week we focus on the latest developments in security and defense relating to Israel and the Middle East, impacting on this region and beyond. And we start with our top items of the past week. The death toll in Iran reportedly topped 16,000 amid a brutal crackdown on street protests by the regime's security forces. Iranian leaders blame Israel and the U.S., especially President Trump, for fomenting the uprising. The U.S. military boosts its forces in the region as the aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln heads to the Middle East amid speculation of an American attack on Iran. Iranian officials threaten all-out war against the U.S. and Israel if the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei is targeted. President Trump unveils new governing boards to rebuild and administer Gaza in Phase 2 of the peace deal that include Turkish and Qatari officials, drawing Israeli objections. Meanwhile, violence continues in Gaza as the IDF kills 2 terrorists in 2 separate incidents as they try to infiltrate into the Israeli-controlled half of the Strip. In a series of airstrikes, the IDF hits Hezbollah terrorist infrastructure in South Lebanon, including launch sites, military camps, and weapons storage facilities. The IDF also takes out Hezbollah terrorists in the Zibkeen area of South Lebanon, operating in violation of the ceasefire agreement between Israel and the Lebanese government. In a joint security operation, the IDF, Shin Bet, Israel Police, and Border Police launch a multi-day operation in Hebron to destroy terror infrastructure, seize illegal weapons, and strengthen security in the southern Judea area. This comes as the IDF reports an 80% drop in terror incidents in Central Command during 2025 compared to the previous year due to boosted operations in Judea and Samaria. And now our big story. To contain the mounting unrest in Iran, the regime turned to an old playbook. Use sheer brute force to contain street protests. The death toll among protesters from security forces' fire is estimated to now top 16,000. Explicitly urged the protesters to continue and promised help if they did. But as the American military builds up its forces in the region for a possible strike, will President Trump fulfill his pledge? If so, are the U.S. and Israel ready for the regime's response? And would any military action be enough to weaken the regime to the point of toppling? Here's Iran's supreme leader throwing the gauntlet down at Trump and Trump's response.
در گذشته وقتی فتنه ای از این قبیل که خب داشتیم فتنه های متعددی داشتیم در کشور اتفاق می افتاد، غالباً مطبوعاتی های آمریکا، سیاسیون درجه دوم آمریکا یا کشورهای اروپایی دخالت می‌کردند. این خصوصیت در این فتنه بود که شخص رئیس جمهور آمریکا، شخص خود او تو این فتنه دخالت کرد، حرف زد، اظهار نظر کرد، تهدید کرد. فتنه‌گران رو تشویق کرد. پیغام داد از آمریکا به این کسانی که رو بعد خواهم گفت کی بودن که بری جلو نترسید. گفت از شما حمایت میکنیم، حمایت نظامی میکنیم. یعنی خود رئیس جمهور آمریکا وارد فتنه شد، جزء فتنه است. بدتر از مجرمان داخلی مجرمان بین المللی هستند، اونا رو رها نمیکنه. باید با شیوه های خودش، با روش درست این کار دنبال بشه، تعقیب بشه و به توفیق الهی ملت ایران همونطور که کمر فتنه رو شکست، کمر فتنه‌گر رو هم باید بشکنه.
They shouldn't be doing it, but I've left notification. Anything ever happens, we're going to blow the whole country is going to get blown up. So we've, originally Biden should have said something. When they made a statement, we always said, why isn't Biden saying anything? Because he didn't. But a president has to defend a president. Like if I were here and they were making that threat to somebody, not even a president, but somebody like they did with me, I would absolutely hit them so hard. But I have very firm instructions. Anything happens, they're going to wipe them off the face of this earth.
And joining us now for more is Reserves IDF Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conriquez. He's the former IDF International spokesperson. He's now a senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, we just heard from the Supreme Leader and President Trump. As the saying goes, this time it's personal. This kind of exchange, does you think it bringing us any closer to, for example, a U.S. military action against Iran?
I think it adds to the strategic ambiguity of what the U.S. is going to do, what President Trump is going to order. And I think that the most important parts are the location of military assets, U.S. military assets and capabilities in the region, which have been building clearly over the last few days. And I think that within a matter of days, maybe a week, the U.S. will have all that it needs in position to take meaningful action against Iran, which I personally believe is coming.
All right. Well, let me ask you, what kind of action could we expect? It does seem as if at this stage, perhaps the U.S. won't be targeting Khamenei himself personally, though we never know with President Trump. But what kind of action do you anticipate?
Well, at this stage, I think that the U.S. will have a pretty wide availability of different tools and different actions. I don't think that we will see a Maduro operation because it is much more difficult to get into Iran and get beyond layers of defense in order to actually apprehend a leader. So I would put that aside. And I don't think that we're going to see ground units. I think that we will see eventually standoff fire from aerial platforms, from naval platforms that will hit specific targets that are related to the oppression of the Iranian people. The Basij headquarters, the IRGC headquarters, and other key nodes of command and control, and really the centers of power of the Iranian regime, the same forces that have been basically mowing down Iranians on the streets. We're looking at everywhere between 8 and 15,000 people, depending on different reports. It's very difficult to get information out, but we know that thousands have been murdered, mowed down on the streets. I assume that these will be the forces that will be the first target, and then an anticipated Iranian retaliation, whether it's against American troops and assets in the region, and if it includes Israel or not, we'll have to wait and see. And then a follow-up, which I think will target the Supreme Leader Khamenei himself and actually aim by military force to bring down the regime and to allow the protesters who have been out on the streets day in, day out, but then mowed down in the most brutal fashion, to give them the kind of the cavalry is here, and let them know that now is a time to actually take back their country and free themselves from 47 years of the Islamic regime's horrible oppression of the Iranian people.
And how do you expect the regime to react, certainly to an initial attack, or something like the restrained, almost symbolic response we saw last year?
I think that the U.S. and probably also Israel will be watching that very closely, watching for the indicative signs of opening of silos, preparation of launching of ballistic missiles, and anything that will be indicative of Iranian intentions to fire towards Israel or to fire towards major U.S. assets. If that happens, Israel and the U.S. will have capabilities at hand in order to preempt that. So I don't know exactly what the Iranians will do. I think they have a pretty limited toolbox available, as opposed to a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, we would have been talking about, the entire region, about Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and proxies in Syria. But today they're left with missiles and the IRGC and perhaps overseas attacks, none of which are going to save the Iranian regime from what is coming, what I believe is coming, and that is an onslaught on the headquarters, the command and control, and the ability
of the Iranian regime to continue to oppress the Iranian people.
Yet we do know the U.S. is keeping the diplomacy option on the table, and we heard Steve Witkoff, the special envoy, President Trump's special envoy, just the other day, speaking at a conference, saying we would like to still negotiate with the regime. We even gave out a list of conditions. Some of them were acceptable to Israel. Noticeable, not on the list of conditions, was any move towards protecting the protesters or any kind of real fundamental change
of engagement and different use of force by the regime. Yeah.
Right. So how likely? I mean, in Israel, you're hearing an expression in Hebrew, "litkof" or "witkof," to attack.
Yes.
Litkof or Witkoff diplomacy.
Yes, well, he is the diplomacy guy. It'll be very surprising if he were to speak about military options. His toolbox is the diplomatic one, and he's someone who has brought significant achievements in the Gaza part of the world and other areas. But I don't think that that is where we're going. I think that the actions, the brutality, the way that the Iranian regime chose to oppress the uprising and the protesters, to basically mow them down in cold blood with Basij and IRGC forces, with foreign mercenaries that they brought in from Iraq, from Afghanistan and other places, that is one bridge too far. That is one bloodbath too far. And I think that the personal attacks and the insults out of Khamenei's Twitter account and other accounts against President Trump, he's only digging his hole deeper, and I don't think that those are very wise decisions that have been made to communicate and to entice personally President Trump.
And Jonathan, even if there was such a serious attack, as you said, against key points of the leadership, even taking out perhaps the supreme leader, would that lead to regime change? We know how powerful and entrenched, for example, the IRGC and its various bodies are.
Indeed. And I think that the most important back-channel conversations and the other scenarios that I'm sure are happening now as we speak are different parts of the Iranian regime, the IRGC specifically, but perhaps other parts, perhaps the army. I don't think the Basij, but army and IRGC. There may be, we may see an Egyptian variant of an Iranian Assisi taking power and relieving the supreme leader of his authority and saying, I want to save the country from a foreign onslaught. I want to save us the destruction that is coming, that you have brought upon us. And as a defensive measure, we're now taking control, and this will be a transit to some type of other governance. That's also a point. I agree with you. The Iranian regime is entrenched. It is brutal. It has had a lot of time to build an oppressive system that is very powerful and still effective. They came close to breaking, but when that came, they simply notched up the violence, used basically tools of war, machine guns and assault rifles, and mowed down their own people on Iranian streets. That is how desperate they were, which I think is indicative of how weak they really are when they resort to that level of violence. So bottom line, yes, powerful, yes, very varied, and there are different centers of power in the Iranian regime. I wouldn't rule out a scenario of a general or some other strong man that will come in and say, let's save us the trouble of an Iraq scenario or a Libya scenario, and let's transition into something that is a different type of regime, and let's not go all the way of having to have mayhem and anarchy on the streets, which could follow if kinetic force is applied on the centers of gravity of the Iranian regime, and then the people take over. That could become very messy.
All right, could become messy, but of course Israel, in this case perhaps, would even prefer the devil it doesn't know compared, since Iran has been for too long the devil it does know.
Indeed.
And we'll have to see if that happens. Jonathan, stay with us. We want to move on to another certainly pressing security issue for Israel. Now, the so-called day after for Gaza that was promised by the Trump peace plan is beginning to take shape, and some of it is perhaps not to Israel's liking. Now, the executive board that will oversee the governance of Gaza has including the Turkish foreign minister and Qatar's prime minister. This is despite Israel's strong opposition to either of those nations having any such role. Ali Shat, chosen by the Trump administration to lead the body that will actually administrate post-war Gaza, is a former deputy minister in the Palestinian Authority, which Israel has also rejected. And these moves are being made without any clear sign yet that Hamas plans to lay down its weapons. That's a clear precondition for phase two to proceed. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu has agreed to join Trump's Board of Peace of world leaders that will sit above these bodies. But at the Knesset this week, he did publicly acknowledge Israel's differences with the U.S. over Gaza.
כן, ואני רוצה להדגיש עוד משהו. חיילים טורקיים וחיילים קטרים לא יהיו ברצועה. יש לנו ויכוח מסוים עם ידידינו בארצות הברית על הרכב מועצת היועצים, כך קוראים לזה, מועצת היועצים שתלווה את התהליכים בעזה. עכשיו, יש ויכוח, אני שם אותו כאן על הבמה, על הפודיום.
Jonathan, a rare acknowledgement publicly of the Prime Minister of a difference with the Trump administration, but perhaps some say moving the goalpost. Now it's no Turkish and Qatari officials, though he acknowledges the differences. How serious a disagreement is this now between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump over the governance of Gaza?
I wouldn't know how serious the disagreement between the two leaders are, but I would say that between total victory and the completion of the goals that Israel, the Israeli cabinet, 2 years and a few months ago set forward to achieve, the complete destruction of Hamas, relieving them of control of the Gaza Strip and getting back all of the hostages, which was added later. Out of those 3 goals, only one has been achieved, almost achieved. We're still waiting for the body of Ran Gvili.
Right, and you're still, I should note, you're still wearing the hostage pin, as Ran Gvili has still not been, his remains have not been returned.
I mean, the suffering of those families won't end when the bodies come home. So I don't know when I'll take it off, but I think definitely until Ran Gvili's returned, his body's returned home, I think I'll continue to wear it. But the difference, the abyss between what Israel wanted to achieve, set forward to achieve, and what we have today is, I think, hugely understated in what the Prime Minister said. This is not total victory. This is not Israel in control and in the driving seat of the situation. This is foreign hostile nations that are now in our backyard, and they've gotten a key from another landlord, and that is the United States of America. And I think that Israel finds itself in a position where what this basically means, the bottom line, what this means is that we're going to have an ongoing conflict with Gaza under Hamas rule, and that this is far, far from done. Future generations of Israeli soldiers, and it is not going away. And as long as Hamas is there, whether it is directly, currently in name, or just one step below the surface, they're still going to be there. They're in control. They'll control education. They will still have their weapons, and they will rebuild because that is their focus. Their focus is jihad. Their focus is the destruction of the state of Israel. And until they are dismantled and disarmed, we are going to continue to have a problem. And what we're seeing now, the day after in Gaza, it is not according to Israel's goals. It is not Israel in the driving seat. There are other powers and parties that are in the driving seat. And it does not at all compute with the goals that Israel set forth to achieve after the massacre of October 7th.
Right, and you talk about Israeli soldiers having to continue to operate, to fight in Gaza, but there is a difference because there is this alternative sort of administration being set up, and you hear concern that what is developing in Gaza is a so-called Hezbollah model, where, for example, Hezbollah was operating under the cover of a Lebanese government or a pseudo-Lebanese government that did have limit to some degree Israel's actions.
Yes, and the only thing missing would be a failing UN force, UNIFIL, and a weak mandate, 1701, and then, the whole charade that we saw for so many years after 2006. Yes, sadly, that's how it quacks, and that is what it looks like, and it is not to my liking. I think we are far from where we need to be. It is not where I hoped we would be in terms of the sacrifices that were made in Israeli blood. Young men, mostly men who sacrificed on the battlefield, thousands of wounded, hundreds of killed on the battlefield, and this is not the political diplomatic achievement that will ensure the absolute goal of making sure that we won't have to fight there again in this generation or the next one. With this current framework, it looks much more likely that Hamas will stay in power, have access to their weapons, and then eventually grow into another formidable fighting force, a terrorist army, and challenge Israeli security again. That is what we needed to prevent. That is what October 7 was all about.
But how much latitude does the government, the Israeli government, have at the same time it is having to work, and to tie it back to the Iran issue, when it is working with the United States and counting on the U.S. to assist it on, for example, the defense of Israel against a possible Iranian attack?
So I think you touch on the most important trade-off that Israel is making here. It's a cognitive decision that Israel is making, basically trading off Gaza and saying, I have an opportunity here to do major strategic long-term change with regards to our main enemy and our most lethal nation-state enemy, which is the Islamic Republic of Iran. There is a window of opportunity with President Trump, a very, very bitter pill, which this day after in Gaza and the Board of Peace, Turkish involvement, Qatari involvement, and basically a window dressing of a Hamas government, which is what we're going to get, Palestinian Authority and pseudo-Hamas. That's a very bitter pill, but it looks as if Israel is willing to swallow that bitter pill, hoping that it'll make significant achievements against Iran and not wanting to jeopardize those achievements with the US and saying, okay, if that's the price that we have to pay, then it looks as if the Prime Minister has made that decision and he's willing to pay that price, which means that future generations of Israelis will have to fight in Gaza. That is the bottom line.
All right, it's sort of an Iran first, Gaza later, perhaps, strategy. But as you said, this is something that, unfortunately, other future generations of young Israelis may have to contend with. Jonathan Conricus, thank you so much for joining us on ILTV Security Brief. And now a final word. In 1991, I served a month's IDF reserve duty in the Gaza Strip, guarding the Israeli settlement block at Gush Katif. By the end of my service, I concluded it had been a mistake to establish Jewish communities in a near indefensible position surrounded by a crowded territory of nearly 2 million Palestinians. Now, I returned to Gaza in 2005 as a journalist to witness the final days of the IDF pullback from the Strip, including the evacuation of some 9,000 civilian communities. And while I understood the logic of the disengagement, to withdraw the IDF from Gaza without sufficient security arrangements in place again seemed to be a hasty move made without sufficient forethought. In both cases, short-term political considerations seem to have been given priority over well-thought-out strategic planning when it came to making these key policy decisions. Now Gaza's future is again at a turning point, with President Trump's appointment of a Board of Peace and a National Committee for the Administration of Gaza that will oversee the reconstruction and governance of the territory. The inclusion of Turkish, Qatari, and Palestinian officials who are associated with the Palestinian Authority on these bodies has rightly drawn objections from the Israeli government. But it has to be said, the Trump administration's steps in Gaza are a direct result of Israel failing to put forward its own day-after plan for the Strip, its own program to establish some kind of viable post-war administration that would be able to carry out its key aims of disarming Hamas and de-radicalizing the Gaza's future that the U.S. has rushed to fill in this case with measures that in some degree run counter to Israel's security considerations. This is the result of an Israeli government that once again put domestic political considerations ahead of serious strategic planning, with Prime Minister Netanyahu trying to avoid a coalition crisis with far-right members of his government who were pushing unrealistic solutions for Gaza in place of making the sometimes difficult but necessary decisions that would have best ensured the future of the state. And now it is too late to rewind the calendar. As one senior U.S. official reportedly said, referring to Netanyahu's objections over the inclusion of Qatar and Turkey, Gaza is our show now, not his. Israel is certainly not likely to press President Trump too hard in Gaza when it needs critical U.S. assistance in dealing with the developing situation in Iran and the threat of another possible attack by its regime. So one can only hope, then, that the Trump administration and successive U.S. governments demonstrate the necessary strength, wisdom, and patience needed to fulfill the pledges of its peace deal, to fully disarm Hamas and end the indoctrination of hatred towards Israel that has bred generations of terrorists in Gaza. But this time around, it will also require this Israeli government and the ones that follow to finally fashion a Gaza policy that is built around clear-eyed assessments of reality rather than the wishful thinking that characterize both the right and left wings of the Israeli political spectrum, and a focus on genuine security needs rather than on domestic political considerations. Only in this way will Israel be able to provide the necessary guidance and assistance, both diplomatically and militarily, in a true partnership with the U.S., one that seeks to rebuild and recreate Gaza in a way that will ultimately prove beneficial for both Palestinians and for Israelis. Thank you for joining us on ILTV Security Brief.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Alec Pollard, coming to you live from Israel with the biggest stories in the region. The head of U.S. Central Command, General Brad Cooper, has arrived in Israel for high-level talks as the U.S. continues its significant military buildup in the region, including the deployment of the aircraft carrier USS Lincoln, warships, and additional fighter jets. And Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is taking notice, moving to a fortified underground bunker in Tehran amid fears of a possible American attack. Khamenei's son, Masoud, is now managing day-to-day communications with government bodies, a sign of growing instability and disruption at the very top of the regime. President Donald Trump said the U.S. is watching Iran very closely following its deadly crackdown on anti-regime protests, which recent reports claim could be as many as 36,000 people killed in the uprising. Here's Trump.
You know, we have a lot of ships going that direction, just in case. We have a big flotilla going in that direction. And we'll see what happens. We have a big force going toward Iran. I'd rather not see anything happen, but we're watching them very closely. But we have an armada. We have a massive fleet heading in that direction. And maybe we won't have to use it. We'll see.
President Trump's envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner met with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about reopening the Rafah crossing with Egypt and advancing Gaza's rehabilitation plan under the Trump administration's peace framework. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had previously declared the crossing, used for smuggling weapons to Hamas, will not open until the last deceased hostage, Ran Gvili, is returned to Israel. Now, European nations are showing growing reluctance to join U.S. President Donald Trump's new Board of Peace, raising questions about the initiative's international legitimacy. An internal European Union document reported by Reuters warns the board concentrates excessive power in Trump's hands and departs from a mandate approved by the UN Security Council, which has now focused on Gaza. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz says Berlin cannot join the board in its current form, citing constitutional concerns, while Spain flatly rejected the initiative, accusing the U.S. of breaking with international norms. Let's hear Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez.
La realidad es que el gobierno de Estados Unidos no está respetando el derecho internacional y está tensionando como nunca se había hecho la relación transatlántica entre los Estados Unidos de América y la Unión Europea. Frente a ello, creo que no debe caber ninguna duda. Europa debe fortalecerse internamente y también abrirse a otros lugares del mundo.
While talks about the future of Gaza are ongoing, battles are still being fought in the Strip. It's covered 4 kilometers long, complete with adjacent rooms and weapons storage. IDF troops also engaged in a firefight east of the separation line within Israeli control, eliminating 6 terrorists. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, the IDF struck a structure from which Hezbollah operated in the Bir el-Sansal area in southern Lebanon, the site which was used as a weapons manufacturing site. The IDF also struck Hezbollah infrastructure in the Bekaa area. Now, Israel is closely watching a dramatic and dangerous escalation in northeastern Syria, where government forces, backed by Sunni jihadist militias and Turkey, are pushing into Kurdish-held areas, raising serious security concerns for Israel and its longtime Kurdish allies. Syrian forces have crossed the Euphrates and are advancing towards the Kurdish-majority Hasakeh province as Kurdish authorities declare a state of general mobilization. Kurdish officials have confirmed ongoing contact with Israel, begging for help and warning of an imminent massacre similar to what was inflicted on the Druze minority last year, if international forces don't intervene to help them. And that's all for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. You can scan the QR code on your screen to join our new ILTV WhatsApp group for updates, and that's all for this time.
Did President Trump just abandon the Iranian people? The US was ready to strike Iran, then suddenly stood down. President Trump says execution stopped, but leaked footage and the Islamic regime say otherwise. So what is really going on? We're uncovering it all, only on JNS, only on the Quad. Welcome back, everybody, to the Quad, and here in our JNS Jerusalem studios with my wonderful co-host, Emily Schrader, human rights activist and journalist, Shoshana Keats-Jaskell, founder of Chokhmat Nashim, elevating Orthodox women's voices, and Bellamy Bellucci, activist, dancer, artist, and much more. Welcome, everyone. What is happening right now? We're all ready. We're here in Jerusalem. We're all getting ready. My husband bought all the water. We fixed our shelter. And we bought the whiskey. And we were hunkering down. And I want to say a few things. First of all, I want to say this. That the Iranian people could be free. I want people to understand this. We were ready to take the sacrifice for that to happen because we knew that if the US would have attacked Iran, then Israel was going to get attacked. And most people here were okay with it for the sake of a free Iran. And just as it's coming to a crescendo, Wednesday night, Thursday, rainy, windy, we're waiting in our homes, and nothing happens. So the question that we want to unpack is, what happened? Why did nothing happen? Is this on purpose? Is this a ruse? Is this waiting for reinforcements from around the world? Was Israel not prepared? And we have some people who had some opinions about that, like Steve Witkoff. Watch this.
President Trump warned the Iranians, and at his direction, we communicated with the Iranians yesterday. And one of the things we were concerned about were the killings that were rumored to be on the way. Hangings, mass hangings, and that's been shut down. Well, I hope there's a diplomatic resolution. I really do. There are four issues: nuclear enrichment, missiles. They have to cut back on their inventory. The actual material that they have, which is roughly 2,000 kilograms, which is enriched anywhere between 3.67% and 60%, and the proxies, of course. I think if they want to come back to the League of Nations, if we can solve those four problems diplomatically, then that would be a great resolution. And I think the alternative is a bad one.
Sorry, I'm very confused. So the only problem with the regime is their essence, their evil, the way they've mistreated and killed their own people, the fact that they're exporting terrorism. If we solve those four problems, then we have a way to deal with Iran. Emily, I'm holding you back here. Emily.
No, first and foremost, the thing that stands out to me most is the fact that he named four major problems, and they are problems with the Islamic Republic, but he did this within 24, 48 hours of at least now 16,000 Iranians being massacred in the streets. Are the people, the citizens of this country, not a factor in any way whatsoever in this equation? I mean, the inhumanity to sit on a stage and say something like that. Oh, if this regime, which is completely illegitimate, wants to come back to the League of Nations, then we can make that happen. Why? Why on earth would you make that happen? Why would you support the Islamic Republic, which is an illegitimate government, being recognized and accepted and tolerated in the League of Nations? The whole problem is that the League of Nations accepted the Islamic Republic in implementing sanctions. And yes, you should be carrying out strikes because the Iranian people are begging in the streets for military intervention. So Steve Witkoff, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. You shouldn't be negotiating, and taking Aragchi's word that executions have stopped is complete bull.
And also,
Was said you were holding me back.
yeah,
Sorry.
but what's curious is that this was said after Khamenei said this.
ما رئیس جمهور آمریکا رو مجرم میدانیم، هم به خاطر تلفات، هم به خاطر خسارات، هم به خاطر تهمتی که به ملت ایران زد.
Heil Hitler.
Pretty much. Oh, little ladies.
Who did to England? They added England. Yeah.
Oh, there we are. Goals out.
Yeah, we would feel left out.
ما بنا نداریم کشور رو به طرف جنگ ببریم، اما مجرمان داخلی رو همراه نمی‌کنیم.
رئیس جمهور آمریکا ترامپ توییت زده بود و تشکر کرده بود که برخورد نشده با 800 نفر از کسایی که توی این اغتشاشات بودن.
خب ترامپ همیشه حرف مفت و بی جهت خیلی میزنه، غلط هم میکنه. ما برخوردمون برخورد قاطع، بازدارنده و سریع هست و الان تعداد زیادی از پرونده هامون منتهی به صدور کیفرخواست شده، به دادگاه ارسال شده.
So, did he not see this? Shoshana, what the Iranian leadership now is doing is taunting Trump. Like, I wouldn't taunt Trump because Trump does what he says and he says what he means.
I hope they do taunt him, and I hope he does say what he, gets pissed and does what he's supposed to do, because I do agree. I think the Iranian people are waiting for Trump to come through. I know Trump doesn't want to be Obama. He doesn't want to be that guy who says, if you gas your people, I'm going to come in, that's my red line, and then does nothing. I know Trump doesn't want to do that. So what he's waiting for, I hope, like I always hope, that there's information we don't have that they have that's going to make whatever strikes do come far more effective and decisive, right? Like, we don't want what happened the last time, which is 12 days of war, and then in the end of the day, they're still in power. We need them gone. And these people otherwise will have sacrificed their lives, men, women, children, in the streets, would have sacrificed their lives for nothing.
It's just, to me, it's just ridiculous. It's like saying, let's ask Hitler to shut down Auschwitz, but he can stay in power.
Yeah.
That's how absurd.
I agree. That's what it sounded like.
This whole thing is. But the question is, was it a little, message from something deeper going on, or maybe even, Israel, we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't. If they attack, it's Israel's fault. If they don't attack, we were the ones who stopped them. Do you think that we weren't ready, perhaps, and we needed a bit more time?
I genuinely think that the Israeli people have been prepared, and they're the ones that are standing with the Iranian people saying, you know what, we'll take the brunt of this. We were waiting. We know that we're going to be attacked.
Yeah.
So at some point, I definitely understand and agree with what you're saying when it comes to Trump. Okay. I always imagine him as a kid in a sandbox. And at some point, you're going to keep poking the bear, and that little kid is going to stand up and beat the living crap out of you. And then you're going to go and cry and say, but this happened to your parents. And when your parents say something, you're going to lie about it. So back to exactly who these people are. They're liars. Yep. So what if they say, oh, the executions of stuff? Yeah. Oh, how nice for you. Like, in terms of diplomacy, that you can then go, well, in terms of diplomacy, if we really want to do this in terms of leadership, shut up. Do what you need to do. This is still the Middle East at the end of the day. And ultimately, they're looking to the West. They're crying out to the West because they actually know the Western powers that are there. Israel can't be the one that's attacking. We're the ones that will be attacked. We're the ones that will carry the brunt of it because that's a message that's going to America. But at the same time, get on with it.
We were the ones who've done the heavy lifting here in terms of destroying their mid-management, let's put it that way, or all of their scientists, a lot of the IRGC in the 12-day war in July. We've really set the scene for this, but we can't be the ones who take this all on our own because we need that American firepower. But I actually do believe that they were going to attack that night. I know that because my kids are in the army. Things were shut down. There was no communication for 24 hours. They really thought that that night, I mean, the way the country behaved is that we thought we were going to be in the middle of this, and then it didn't happen. So I don't know, because you can never tell with Trump. You know, we also kind of misguided the situation before the 12-day war, if you remember. Do you remember Bibi was going to marry his son, and it looked like there was a little public spat between Bibi and Trump, and then the whole thing was a ruse. So you never know. These are very clever, strategic people there. But it just seems to me that in the face of the documented evidence, they've got Starlink. It is very weak. It is very bad. Whoever can does it. And then you see the atrocities going on, like what we see here. The body bags on the street, the people being shot in hospitals, the young people that you see with blood, dead, with their eyes open, lying on the street. How much more? 20,000 people is estimated it could be. I mean, we have no idea. It could be more. 20,000 people. 2 years of war that we had here against Hamas. And even according to Hamas numbers, and we all know they're lying bastards, 70,000 dead. We know it was 1.1 in terms of the ratio, 1.15, 1.12. We know that we're talking about potentially 35,000 innocent people that died as a result of a war that we didn't start. And yet, in 4 days, there's 20,000 people. And the world is still thinking about this.
It's even more appalling when you think about the fact that, like, when it comes to Israel or Gaza, this is a legally justified and legally declared war in response to it's a defensive war in response to an attack on October 7th. It shouldn't even be compared in this, civilian casualties, which of course are tragic, but that's what happens in war. I mean, that's why we didn't start a war. This is a completely different scenario. I mean, these are crimes against humanity being committed by a government that's supposed to represent the people that they're executing and butchering on the street. Exactly. And I do think in regards to the attack, I understand the strategic diversion, perhaps. It is possible. It remains to be seen what happens if Trump will still attack. My biggest problem with this is that at the same time when we saw the worst nights of this massacre, when we saw well over, at least from what we know now, well over 10,000 people were killed on those 2 nights, when the first few nights that the internet was cut off in Iran, was the same time that President Trump said, continue protesting, take over institutions, go into the streets, help is on its way. Help is on its way? Yeah. It's been almost a week. Iranians still have no internet. Like, you can't, when you're the president, you can't say those things. You can't just talk and not understand that there are consequences. And there's a protester that I actually posted about whose last words to his family were, President Trump is with us, I'm going to the streets to protest. And he died. And it's very, very upsetting. We know revolutions, it's going to be paid in blood. We know that. We knew that before. It's going to be really difficult. But it can be less difficult if President Trump does what he needs to do.
That's why I actually do think he's going to do. I mean, I hope. I'm praying. Shoshana?
I think what people don't realize, and I don't know what the average human being on planet Earth sees and listens to. I know that we are obviously consuming all the time content from Iran, even though the internet is shut down. And even, I find myself just looking at the screen and crying at people having to open hundreds of body bags to find their loved one, or to have to pay thousands of dollars in bribes to have the body released and to sign confessions and to record apologies. And it's so much work. Sounds crazy to say this. It's so much worse than just having your family members killed. Yes. You are also being forced to pretend that they were traitors and dissidents and that they've done things wrong, or the story of the father who went to the pharmacy to get medicine for his 3-year-old and she's shot in his arms. Like, this is so much worse than I think what people even understand. And watching that man, the supreme leader, talk, it's almost like it's very hard to digest that people are really like this and that there's anyone in the world that defends them.
Because I think that we've been brought up in a society where we don't actually know how to recognize real evil. You know, and everything is moral relativism. Oh, but you know, the imperialist West caused the situation. And people have lost the sense of good and bad. And I don't think we have, because we've seen evil. We've seen evil in the face. Hamas is evil. What it does to their own kids and what they did to our kids, okay? We know evil. But the world has, I mean, you hear these morons defending the Roger Waters, that idiot, and the Corbyns. Nobody's saying anything whilst people are being murdered. It just shows that people, to me, this is very clear how the Holocaust happened. I can see it in front of us. When people think of the Holocaust, they think it's like another like, I don't know, another universe. But no, this is human nature. Brainwash, indoctrination, not being able to see evil when it's looking you in the face.
And to say to somebody, like to people, especially in the US, when they say, oh no, but the killing stopped because President Trump said it did. You don't actually understand what that even means. So besides the fact that there's no internet, yes, we are able to see videos that are coming out of there. We're able to see pictures. We're able to hear people's, testimonies and pleading for this. That doesn't mean that they didn't go ahead while the lights are out and we're not doing it in public. We're just going to go into hospitals and start going bullet in the head, just like that. And then you have people like that are like praising the supreme leader. And at the same time, that is such a deep level of brainwashing that happens at such a young age. So when we try to explain to other people that this is also the way that Hamas pulls children in. This is how martyrs are raised. They don't understand it and they choose not to see it. When you try to tell them in a place like these are Iranians. Take Israel out of the equation. Take Hamas out of the equation. Look at Iranians that are actually begging for this. People have had to flee, that left and started from nothing in America, raising their children. People have lost their parents, saying, one day I wish that I could take my family back home to what used to be the Paris of the Middle East. It is disgusting that all that you can see and hear from people right now, young or old, are going, no, but it's Israel's fault. And at some point, whatever is going on the ground is because the U.S. interfered, the U.S. created it, and Israel was a part of it. It's not a Mossad operation.
I mean, the whole thing is it's patronizing, it's cruelty. They've also been brainwashed. The woke, West has been brainwashed against Jews, against Western values that are good values compared to this. They have been brainwashed themselves. We're dealing with a world which is completely brainwashed, and they can't even see evil when it's right in front of them. Okay, but let's move on from one evil to another evil. Hamas, the one that is right on our border.
Really,
and
the same.
Yes, they're the same. And let's just remind everybody that the Islamic Republic of Iran have been funding Hamas. They were the sponsors of October 7th, amongst other people like Qatar. And they are the biggest sponsors of Hezbollah. And when their people were starving and didn't have water in the taps, they still managed to send $1 billion to Hezbollah since Nasrallah, may he rot in hell, was assassinated by us. So that's just reminding everybody that the Iranian Islamic regime sacrifices its own people to ensure that they export enough terrorism to cause a lot of chaos and kill as many Jews and Americans as possible. Okay, Board of Peace. Board of Peace. We don't even know whether this is the right name for it. If peace
clearly not
something you couldn't even talk about. But the Board of Peace was announced this week, and I'm a bit confused because there's a few boards of peace. There's the executive one, there's the ceremonial one, there's the advisory one. There's about 2 or 3 of them, no women anywhere. Oh, surprise, surprise. But There's been quite a lot of controversy because Turkey and Qatar have been nominated to be part of this board of peace. In other words, they've put the foxes in charge of the chickens, or they've really put the people who are funding Hamas in charge of dealing with Hamas. So what do we think about that? And is this going to be a real problem between Israel and U.S. relations?
Where you're saying that having Qatar and Turkey share a border with us might be a problem? I don't understand. What can go wrong? What do you mean? Of course it's ridiculous. All they're going to do is do nicer tunnels. They're just going to be more
air conditioned,
more
They'll be like luxury with Wi-Fi,
luxury tunnels.
like
That's
fancy
what I'm looking for.
Jacuzzi.
Yes, welcome to the harem.
Oh my God. Yes.
It's so scary to think about how on such a global stage, when things should be changing, moving forward, there should be a different direction in which the Middle East is taking. As long as there's money on the table, you can go in either way and say, for diplomatic reasons, this is much better. I can accept a plane for so-and-so money because it's for diplomatic reason. I can get in bed with the enemy because it's for diplomatic purposes.
Yeah.
At some point, where do we draw the line and say no? And if it's going to be somebody that you're going to bring the evil in, invite it into your home, break bread with it at your table, please pull the trigger at some point or don't invite it in.
They brought in Qatar and Turkey, the two Muslim Brotherhood strongholds in the world now, to disarm.
Who, by the way, the U.S. administration did ban the Muslim Brotherhood, but only certain chapters. And the chapters they conveniently did not name were Turkey and Qatar. Funny how that works. Let's not forget that the Turkish foreign minister himself is someone who publicly eulogized and praised Ismail Haniyeh after we assassinated him. So the person who praised Ismail Haniyeh is also the person who is at least in part responsible for disarming Hamas in Gaza.
Yeah. It's really crazy. And going back to your point, Bellamy, about money and connecting this to Iran, the most disturbing report or opinion is that Saudi and the UAE stopped America from attacking for oil reasons, because the last thing they want is a free Iran with trade ties. They are so rich in crude oil, and that will mean that the price of oil goes down, and that would affect these countries. I almost can't believe that 90 million people are being held hostage for the sake of the price of oil. Could it be true? Have we lost it?
Sure, it's true. And the irony is, the Jews are the ones with the money who control the banks.
Yeah.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah, we're like small potatoes.
I mean,
we're so small potatoes.
have you seen a map?
Another thing that I remember hearing from Venezuelans when what happened with Maduro was when Americans said, it's for oil, it's for oil, they said, we don't care.
Yeah,
Just get them in, take the oil.
What do we care what they're...
Iranians are saying the same thing, like, take the oil.
Yeah, let me-
Just deal with this, like, deal with the evil that's literally been massacring us this whole time. If that's what it takes, take it. Take it.
Honestly, I feel like we're living in bizarro world, in like an upside down world where right is wrong and wrong is right, and people are blind and they can't see what's right in front of them. And I will reiterate this to the people of Iran who are listening, if you can listen, and certainly the Iranian diaspora, that Israel is with you and we are ready to face the consequences of liberating you, because the consequences will be felt here. And I think that there's not one Israeli who's not ready for this.
I think that the U.S. response, also with the Gaza border of peace and also with Iran, there's a fight internally going on. Even within the administration, you can see it. And of course, that's to be expected, because the Islamic Republic alone, not even getting into Qatar, but the Islamic Republic alone has spent billions on lobbying, soft lobbying also in Washington. They're pushing out for certain things. They're trying to spread a lot of, one of their primary claims right now is that there is no opposition leader, which is of course false. We see people across 31 provinces, all provinces of Iran, chanting for Reza Pahlavi. Does everyone love him? No. Is he the most popular, most known, most respected opposition leader? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not only that, he's pro-Western and pro-democracy.
Yeah.
I don't know why the West is hesitating, other than the fact that you have such a disinformation campaign lobbying against it. And we see the same thing with Qatar. That is why, at least part of the reason why they lobbied against a strike on the United States. And it's this misguided ideology that we saw from Steve Witkoff, that you can negotiate or somehow compromise with people who have this Islamist ideology, and you can't.
With the devil.
Can't change them.
With the devil. You can negotiate with the devil. That's basically what Witkoff wants everybody.
We went from going, you can't negotiate with terrorists, to saying, no, well, if they do this, you know, we'll just get their cousin and a brother to kind of deal with them while we look over
that
here.
they care. Even Witkoff, he assumes that the leadership cares about what's best for their country.
Exactly.
And they don't. Hamas doesn't, Hezbollah doesn't, the Houthis don't, and certainly the Islamic Republic of Iran doesn't. So any negotiation that starts from there is going to be wrong.
Exactly, because what they don't understand, because they can't see things through the lens of the Islamist, jihadi, extremist, is that their ideology comes before people and comes before lives. It's the opposite of us. We put lives first, and they put lives last because their ideology, their very toxic ideology, they live for death. It's a death cult. And somebody like Witkoff can't understand that.
Yep.
He can't understand it, and therefore he shouldn't be making these decisions.
But another red light, which I think didn't get enough of an echo of a voice, is why is Iran having military drills in South Africa? Just off the coast.
You always bring us the South African angle.
Because they're Baptist, the Islamic Republic.
I'm looking. I'm like, why is nobody talking? As though it's just normal.
Yeah.
As though it's just normal. It's like, okay, you're where we keep, it's like a storage unit. Nobody knows the address, nobody knows what's going on, but boom, all of a sudden your whole house will be furnished. From where?
This is like the rehearsal.
The rehearsal.
The rehearsal place. Anyway, we pray, as we always do, that things get better. And look, you never know. By the time next week comes along, we could be looking at a free Iran, and we could all be doing the quad in Tehran. Bezrat Hashem, inshallah, please God. Okay, moving on, because there's so many scumbags to deal with, as in every week. And I know that it's a very favorite part of the show for many of you. Scumbag of the week. Bellamy, let's start with you. Who's your scumbag this week?
Cenk Uygur, or whatever your name is, Cenk. I'm so sick of this man to a point where I don't understand how he's always foaming at the mouth. But for once, he didn't really do so much. But what he had to say was more disgusting than anything else. Take a look.
It's obviously on behalf of Israel. Who are we kidding? Look at the Israelis frothing at the mouth. We've seen them for 20 years go, you have to invade Iran on our behalf. You have to invade Iran on our behalf. Okay, well, why doesn't Israel do it? And by the way, look at all this about how, the Iranians are, the regime is bad guys. Of course they are, but so was Saddam. That didn't mean we should go into Iraq. So Kim Jong-un's a terrible leader, abuses his people so badly in North Korea. How come there's no propaganda against him? Because Israel, it doesn't have North Korea within Greater Israel. So since it's not related to Israel, there's no talk of the terrible leader of North Korea. How about you guys are worried about state-sponsored terrorism? Israel is a terrorist state. So they killed 2,000 in Iran, these protesters, and I hate that the regime did that. Israel killed 70,000 Palestinians. They occupy 5.5 million of them, and they say they're never going to free them. So why are we helping a terrorist state start another disastrous war in Iraq that we're going to have, in Iran in this case, that we're going to have to pay for?
Okay.
And if people don't know this, Iran is 4 times the size of Iraq. They're walking you into another disaster, and I guarantee it, and it'll be for Israel again, and then they'll pretend that it wasn't, and they'll call everyone an anti-Semite.
I just feel that one day this guy's going to have a heart attack. On screen. He's going to explode. He sweats profusely. And one day he's going to go...
But what really bugged me, there was one question. She handled herself so well. What bugged me was when he said, who elected you to speak on behalf of the Iranian people? Who elected you to speak on behalf of Palestinians?
Exactly.
Who are you?
Oh,
this man has been, and it gets worse and worse and worse as time goes by. Between him and Anna, just having a little circle jerk all the time about how much they hate Israel, they will never actually come from a place speaking for people on the ground, people that are actually struggling. It always has to be led right back to Israel, right back to Palestine, right back to Gaza. Can't you just for 2 seconds speak on the matter on the table. I know that, you know, that's your paycheck from Iran and Qatar is kind of going to go a little bit down. It might dip, but trust me, nothing's going to happen to you, buddy. No.
You know, that's the thing about anti-Semitism, that it's anti-Semites, they're all consumed by Jewish hatred.
That's the lens. They see everything, the whole
They
world.
see, it really is like Charlie Kirk used to say, a brain rot. Everything they see through that lens, so much so that Anna Kasparian is like fighting over the numbers. No, it's 500 people killed, not 2,000 people. Oh, she didn't really care about the Gaza numbers. She would just spout 500,000, 300,000, it doesn't matter. It really is the brain rot that is anti-Semitism. And in the end, it will destroy them because we've seen it again and again. Wonderful, wonderful. They've been scumbags many times before, of course.
Yes.
But it's a particularly honorable mention this week. Thank you very much. Emily, who's your scumbag?
So my scumbag was also someone that was on Piers Morgan this past week.
Oh, yeah.
Also on Amanpour, of course. Because
yeah.
who would Christiane Amanpour be if she wasn't highlighting and giving a platform to terrorists?
Yes.
But Mohammed Marandi, who is an unofficial spokesman of the Islamic Republic, he's a professor at the University of Tehran, and he's a known propagandist who is often parroted around in Western media, shilling for the Islamic Republic, spreading absolute lies, just flat out lies, which we saw this week again on Piers Morgan. The same line of criticism that, you know, oh, it's actually Israel behind it, and oh, there's not that many casualties, and if there are, then it's actually not us, it's actually Israel, on and on and on. But the reason in particular that he's my scumbag this week is because this is happening, all these interviews have been happening at a time when the internet and phone connectivity has been completely 100% cut off for the people of Iran. So you tell me, audience, how is Marandi doing interviews via Zoom or whatever platform they're using on the internet when the internet is completely shut off? While also claiming, by the way, that he doesn't actually work for the regime and he's not a part of it, and on and on and on. So there's a thing in Iran called the white SIM cards, and the white SIM cards refer to people who are affiliated with or are the Islamic Republic. They're the only ones who have certain access to internet. It's actually what they're talking about promoting in the future. They've said that they're going to keep the internet off until at least March. Hopefully that changes and Elon Musk can do something about the situation with Starlink. But this is one of the ways that they control the narrative in the West. And Marandi is one of the chief propagandists of this method, of this tactic that the Islamic Republic uses. So he's my scumbag this week and many other weeks as well, but in particular, an absolute scumbag this week for defending the Islamic regime while the people are being murdered in the streets with no access to internet, simply so that he could parrot this disgusting, perverse narrative that's blaming the victims, the hostages, the 90 million hostages, the people of Iran under the Islamic Republic.
Amen. He is really disgusting, and I mean, and his little smirk always. Like people are dying and he's smiling. And what I love about his appearance on Piers is that they brought in Goldie to debate him. This is a new thing for Piers Morgan. They don't tell people that they're going to bring somebody else on. You think you're doing a one-on-one, and they bring somebody else. So they brought her, and he was like, I never agreed to debate. Of course, he has not a leg to stand on. He is really a piece of work. So yeah, a very, very good comeback. And I mean, you talk about internet. The Khamenei is still tweeting, and so are all his cronies. So there you go. Only certain people get internet. Shoshana, who's your scumbag? Or should I say scumbags this week?
I have a car full of scumbags.
Car full, a bus full. A bus full, a limo full of scumbags.
I don't even know most of these guys. Andrew Tate, Nick Fuentes, Sneeko, Tristan Tate, Clavicular, and Amrao Fudel, who is also apparently Myron Days, who are all in the car. You'll see it in a minute, but they're all in a car, Heil Hitlering to Yee's song. But the best thing for me is that Yee's chorus, it's N-word, Heil Hitler. N-word, Heil Hitler. But the white boys in the car are afraid to say the N-word because of the black guys in the car, so they can't even be full scumbags because they're scared. And I'm like, could you have, like, you know, it was a Saturday Night Live skit. It couldn't be better. Yeah. The white guy would be like, Heil Hitler, Heil Hitler, because they were afraid. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? Stand by your convictions. Let's see what goes on in that car afterwards. And then at the party, oh my God, Bellamy, I have to thank you for this because I saw it this morning after I chose my car of scumbags. They're at her party, and these women, guys, girls, why are you there? Unless they're paying you a ton of money and you use that to like support, I don't even know what women love it. Like, do not be in your disguise. And these guys are sitting there like, say you hate women, say you hate women, say you hate women.
Aren't half of them
telling
gay?
the women, oh, they're for sure gay. Of course they're gay. I mean, gays are great, but guys who are gay but don't admit to being gay, they're not so great. Anyway, you have to watch these clips. You guys have to watch these clips. Start with the car.
Bitch, I'm the villain. Juice man! Juice man! They don't understand the things I say on Twitter. Nigga, how Hitler? They don't understand the things I say on Twitter. All my niggas Nazis, nigga, how Hitler? She wanna fuck with the pen. I put the crumb on the bench. Hey, hey, hey. Nigga, how Hitler? She reaching down in my pants. She got the rope in her hands.
Do you think that this is where the MAGA movement will now self-correct? Like, how could anybody stand with this? Oh, is Megyn Kelly going to say, oh, hang on, Clavicula's a young father?
No. Probably her next guest.
But maybe it's Israel.
The strangest thing was that the same guy that's in the pink suit right there is Tristan. That is Tristan Tate.
Oh, the
and
brother.
Tristan Tate, before that at the pre-party, holding a lovely white claw, because that's what real men do, goes ahead and says to Nick Fuentes, this is the real N-word with a hard R. This is the real nigger. And he goes, and you can hear in the background Andrew Tate saying, this is the last real nigger that's left. Sits down and then apologizes to Nick Fuentes for how he saw him. And then later on in the stream, when they've come back from the club, because now, Nick Fuentes has said no to dating any woman or to taking any woman's number who's, barely covered at any point, because we know why they're there. You're not really going to be beating these trafficking rumors, brothers. Goes ahead and says, one of the guys, Speed or whatever, somebody says, assalamu alaikum, whatever, and then he goes off and responds to it. And then you see Fuentes in the back going like this, I don't even understand what you were saying, bro. And then later on says, do you believe that the leader do you think that Christianity was started by a Jew, or do you believe that the leader of the Christians is a Jew? And Fuentes looks up and says, yes, Jesus Christ. And there's so many clips that you said.
Are you saying that these people made Nick Fuentes look moderate?
Yes. Yes. I'm not kidding you. They actually think. I watched so many things. It was a scene.
Even Nick Fuentes is going, it's a bit too much for you. Oh my God. Oh, how ridiculous can it get?
The best part also is if you look at Valerie's clips on her Instagram, there's this guy's like bragging about how he will never I won't take a woman out to dinner. I won't sit across from her for 3 hours. 3 hours? Like, because you're a monkey. What are you going to say to a woman for 3 hours?
With a cigar.
You have no conversation tonight.
People can't get laid anyway. I have women.
That's the problem. They're all a bunch of losers living on their mother's
That was very cathartic.
They're all living in their mother's basements and are losers, and they got a little bit of fame right now. But I'm hoping that this type of thing actually makes the MAGA movement wake up and go, Ben Shapiro is right. Ben Shapiro had a point. Okay. Fantastic.
Yeah, that was
bus full of scumbags. All right, so my scumbag of the week, I'm taking a real turn here. And compared to these people, maybe he's less of a scumbag, but really, he's a pretty bad scumbag. He is the chief constable of the West Midland Police in the UK, called Craig Guildford. Now, I want to take you back a few months when the West Midland Police, which is the area of the UK where Aston Villa, Birmingham is, and the city was holding a football match, soccer for the Americans, between Aston Villa, which is a very popular football team, and Maccabi Tel Aviv. And the allegations now that have been proven correct is that Birmingham is a very, very Islamist town. They've got MPs, members of parliament, that basically represent Gaza rather than the Brummies, the Birmingham people. And essentially what the West Midland Police did is they invented a whole excuse that Maccabi Tel Aviv fans were violent, were dangerous, and it was a danger to public order. And that's why they ban all Maccabi Tel Aviv fans from coming to the game, which is almost unprecedented. It's happened a few times before with other teams, but we're talking about particularly violent teams. That's not what Maccabi Tel Aviv is. Maccabi Tel Aviv, yes, is raucous fans, but they certainly don't have a violence problem beyond the regular football fan. And now it has been, I mean, and at the time they came out on TV and I said from the beginning, this is BS. This is BS. And guess what? It was BS because it was uncovered recently that essentially what happened was that the Islamists in Birmingham were threatening violence, and the police, as weak, feckless police that they are, instead of dealing with the Islamists, they decided to blame the Jews and ban the Jews because they didn't want to deal with the Islamists because they're scared of them. But why is this guy, Craig Guilford, my scumbag this week? Because he was actually in a committee, in a public inquiry, and he said something which are so ridiculous. They asked him, why didn't you reveal that it was the Islamists that were threatening violence? He said, well, nobody ever asked me. So basically, he tells half a story. He blames the Israeli fans, and he doesn't uncover that it was actually because they were scared of the Islamist violence. And then he has the gall, the chutzpah to say in a public inquiry, well, you never asked that particular question, so I never gave you the full information. Doctored files about Maccabi Tel Aviv fans that even the Dutch police said, no, this was not us. And you've completely fabricated evidence about the violence when there was, in fact, a pogrom in Holland against those same fans. But what I'm really upset about is that this week he retired. He retired with a full pension. He retired with everything that a regular chief of police retires. He did not face the consequences for lying under oath, for doctoring up charges against a foreign football team, and for blaming the Jews for what in fact was Islamist violence. And so, Craig Guilford, you are a coward. You basically didn't do the first thing you have to do as the chief of police, and that is protect the people in your town and protect the people visiting your town. And instead you just bend over to be completely taken over, run over, and manipulated by the Islamists in your town that you were too much of a coward to deal with. And so I'm glad you're gone, but you should have gone in disgrace, facing the consequences of your lies, your dishonesty, and basically of being the weak leader that you were. So good riddance to you, Craig Guilford. And that is my scumbag of the week. All right. We need some heroes. Really, and when you see his face, you saw the inquiry?
I saw.
I mean, you were there at the football match.
Yeah.
You were pulled aside, weren't you?
Yeah.
Because you're known, Emily.
Because I had a shirt that said Zionist.
Yes, and you're known to be a violent football fan, aren't you?
That's me. A violent football fan.
This is what they're worried about. Okay, now, let's cleanse our souls with some heroes. Bellamy.
Mine is Meraj Tehrani, who is a singer, and he had just basically come back, and I think he was on his way to Turkey, and he had just landed, and you can hear in his voice, it's just so disheartening. Please take a look.
آقا من الان رسیدم ترکیه. همه رو دارم میکشن. همه رو دارم میکشن. بچه‌ها رو همه رو دارم میکشن. فقط کمک خارجی. فقط کمک خارجی احتیاج داریم. میشه ما کمک بگیریم نمیدونم نمیدونم چطوری میتونیم وقتی کمک بگیریم کوه دارن غرقم میکنن تو سر سینه شلیک مستقیم بیرحمانه دارن میکشن همه رو.
I think it's so important to have, even for me, like to call him a hero, as emotional as that is, because it brought so much light to what's going on. And it was very quick that video was literally went viral.
He left.
Yes, he had just fled.
Fled Iran, like now.
Yeah, he had just fled, and it brought so much attention, I think, in such a short space of time. I was watching the video and I couldn't stop watching it over and over again because I thought, this is what the world needs to see. This is what the world needs to hear.
Yeah.
So he didn't say, oh, there are a few. He said they're murdering everyone.
Yeah.
There's no understanding of what the Iranian people are going to. The fact that you
Except us.
Yeah, except us.
The footage that I've received is honestly indistinguishable from October 7th. It's horrifying. And the people that I've spoken to, like people I personally have spoken to, have witnessed 100, 200 people shot right in front of them. It's the level of barbarity and cruelty is only matched by what we saw on October 7th.
This is 7th century barbarism.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is.
And like, my hat goes off to him, not just for bringing attention, but he put his life on the line. He really did put his life, his family's life, he put it on the line in a moment to say, I need to bring attention, I need to call attention with the utmost urgency right now because the world needs to know what's happening. The clock is ticking.
Yeah. Well, thank God that we have heroes like that, and thank you for bringing them to us, Bellamy. It's heartbreaking, but we need more of them, so that people wake up. Or if the zombies are going to wake up, I don't know. Emily.
Now you upset me. So my hero this week is a similar topic, although not an Iranian this week. I know, it's a shocker. Lindsey Graham. Senator Lindsey Graham has been an absolute voice of moral clarity and courage from day one when it comes to the issue of Iran, but in particular since the protests, since the uprising started in Iran, he has been very forward in calling for U.S. assistance. He has echoed the voices of the Iranian people. He has continued to pressure while also working with the Trump administration. He visited Israel just a few days ago to show solidarity with Israel as it potentially faces something with the Islamic Republic of Iran. And I just have to say that voices like his, there's not enough of them. And to do so at a time like this, when I know that he's getting a lot of backlash from, the more extremist elements, both in the lobbying circles, but also on social media and in the media. And despite that, he's remained completely morally clear, has not wavered even for a second in what needs to happen when it comes to the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is a regime change, a complete deconstruction of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and ultimately rebuilding a free Iran. He also met with the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi this week, which was a tremendous sign of solidarity and support for the Iranian people, and a sign that gives people hope for the future, that this isn't Iraq. Iran isn't an Arab country. It doesn't have the same history. The future of a free Iran will be very, very different. And that's something that Lindsey Graham has done a great job advocating for. So Lindsey Graham, you are my hero of the week.
Yeah, he deserves it. He's always on the right side. Yeah, he's a good guy. He really is a good guy. Great hero, Emily. Shoshana.
So you actually just reminded me of something. It's really, really hard to hear. Even though I don't understand a word of Persian, you don't need to understand a word of Persian, just like when you see that video, to understand and to hear in this 6.5-minute phone call. There's a woman, she describes herself as the daughter of a senior commander inside Iran. Yeah. And she calls the Persian Manato news program. Yeah. The emotion with which she describes what she herself has seen and endured, even as a daughter of a commander. She's